OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.
Right, it's Thursday morning. You're very welcome along to OTB AM. It's Gilroy and Eoin Sheahan with you all the way through until 10 this morning. And, well, there's still plenty for us to talk about, to pick over the carcass of what was the European Super League, because this morning they're suggesting that maybe a British version of the Super League might be about to be foisted upon us or released, depending on your viewpoint, because Celtic and Rangers are being linked with a move to whatever that league will now be called. Or maybe they'll just merge the English football and Scottish leagues, which would seem to go against the geopolitical trend at the moment of Scottish independence. But look, we'll deal with that a little bit later on. Tom English is going to join us. In the meantime, we've got to parse through the latest crazy Comical Alley interview that Florentino Perez has done. Owen, good morning to you.
Good morning. Yeah, it seems that Florentino Perez kind of wakes up in a cold sweat in the middle of the night regularly and decides to go on television, and then we wake up and we look at his ridiculous quotes, and that has happened once again this morning. So
part of me kind of feels like Florentino Perez is telling the exact truth here. And it's so Johnny Lou's piece is carried in the Irish Independent today. European Super League may have died a death, but the cartel lives on. And like, I mean, you know, you've all seen Narcos or some variation of it. The cartel never dies. Just whoever is at the top gets killed and replaced, and somebody new pops up and they do even better in the future. Florentino Perez is saying, we haven't gone away. We haven't gone away, you know.
But is that a stupid thing for him to be saying at this point? Like he said, the Super League is not dead. It's on standby and we'll work on the project. All 12 founder clubs signed the same contract. And he said that nobody has yet paid the penalisation fee. So a contract still exists. Nobody's broken their contract with the European Super League thing. You're right, this thing hasn't gone away. But if you want to stay part of the cartel, you go to ground for a while. And Florentino Perez is not going to ground. Could
we just briefly workshop? I come to you, you're a billionaire owner of a football club. We have a dinner in a very nice restaurant in America, apparently. That was what happened first. And we're like, look, this league is good. I'm making 100, 150 million a year or 500 million every 3 or 4 years. I'm just whipping it out of the club. It's grand. But like, we could literally be printing money if we wanted to by never having the threat of relegation and just selling our rights ourselves and not really releasing our players to international football if we didn't really want to. How would we go about that? Okay, great plan. Now, how do we bring people with us? What's the correct answer to bring people with, to bring fans and to bring football, well, now we use this word carefully, consumers, with, how do you bring people with you so this outcry doesn't happen? What would you have done now if you knew what the outcry was going to be in retrospect?
Include a promotion relegation mechanism. It's as simple as that. I think that the outcry would have been diminished if there was a promotion relegation mechanism in this, and that completely defeats the whole purpose of what they were trying to do. This idea that you're guaranteed your revenue every single year, because if you're Arsenal or Spurs, you're probably going to get relegated pretty quickly from a European Super League, and there goes your revenue straight away. Can you get back into the European Super League? Like, it just defeats the whole thing. So without that...
Okay, so you can't have that. I'm saying you can't have that. I'm thinking almost exclusively in terms of bringing public perception with you. What do you need to do? Like what Florentino Perez did last night when he went, it's a radio studio, the interview, it's not a million miles away from our one, and he's sitting there going, this project is not dead. He's telling the truth. He is absolutely telling, this project is not dead. This version of the project is dead, and it might be a little while before they all reconvene and kind of meet across the room and go, well, that didn't work out. I mean, it was your fault, really. No, it was, and once that bit's over, the next generation of administrators in these clubs will come forth and go, we need the Germans for a start. We need Paris Saint-Germain, because we do. And what then? What bit changes the mind of the public?
Like, I don't know, but one thing that might help is if UEFA are in a weaker position and if the domestic leagues are in a weaker position. The thing was that the status quo was better than what people were breaking away to, and the relatively, I guess, uninspiring format that was being proposed. There was a sense of, like, I mean, if this thing had happened, there would have been a sense of interest in how this thing would actually go, but nobody was willing to accept the consequences of seeing this thing play out. the thing is, the product wasn't good enough. It wasn't good enough in comparison to the Champions League and to the domestic leagues, and that maybe is what this whole thing boils down to.
I actually think that the product, they never explained what the product was, right? They never said it's going to be. So the brilliant story yesterday, I can't remember, and I'm apologies, but somebody came out and found the details that the PR company had been hired on Sunday afternoon for this announcement on Sunday evening, and it was like, okay, there's a big problem, because no one had a strategy to bring people with them. If you were to say to the Liverpool fans, the Man United fans, the Arsenal fans, the Chelsea fans, Spurs fans, and all the other big clubs, and actually have 15 founding members, including all the other ones, some of the Germans as well. This is going to guarantee top quality football every Thursday night for the rest of your lives. Every Thursday night is going to be a night of big football, and you'll continue to play in your domestic league. It's the best of both worlds. If they'd put that story out there 7 months ago, 3 years ago, this is a possibility, it's on the table. Do you really like all those crappy early stage Champions League games? This might have had a chance. But the trouble was, they burst out and they allowed the narrative to be seized in all of the countries by the Gary Nevilles of the world and whoever it was. And so the outrage bubbled up, because let's face it, we live in an outrage. We live in a world where outrage is a commodity, and it's brilliant. It absolutely was the type of thing that everybody was tuned to the TV going, these people are incredibly angry, much angrier than I've ever seen them about anything before. But what specifically were they angry about? They were angry about the absence of relegation. I mean, almost all of those teams qualify for the Champions League 8 years out of 10. So it's not like that relegation is a real thing for them. The bastardization of football, the money that has been pumped into the top tier of English football has completely separated those top 6, top 8 clubs in England from the rest of football. The notion that we're going to see many teams bubble up from the lower divisions who haven't at some point in the past been a major club and become a top-tier European team, I can't really see it. Maybe Leicester can do it with the help of their billionaire owner. Perhaps, plucky Leicester will be able to get there. And it will be, in some cases, it'll seem like it's a football miracle, but it isn't really a football miracle because there's so much money there. I think that the European Super League and the variation of what we're getting with the new Champions League are not a million miles apart. They're going to grandfather in teams who don't qualify for the Champions League. There's no relegation from the Champions League because you have to qualify for it. It's kind of a reverse. It's a fairly similar thing. It's just that UEFA get to keep more of the money. When the clubs are looking at UEFA going,
what have you done to deserve it?
Well, you win this one, buddy. You win this one. But actually, did you really? And if you look at the how quick UEFA were like, we're all buddies again. This is fine. We're all buddies again. I don't think anything's going to happen here. I don't think there's going to be any repercussions for those clubs. I would be amazed if there are. And the other thing that's come out is the Tory government. Remember who you're trusting here. The Tory government are going to have an inquiry, and they're going to have a commission, and they're talking about having a fan-led investigation into what the future of football should be like. Are we really saying that the Tories are going to come out and say that at the end of this, we need ownership of football clubs to be transferred from billionaires, from some of the most successful capitalists in the world, to the people? Is that what we expect the Conservative Party of England to do? To say, we think that we should seize the assets of rich people and give them to what the Tories would say are poor people? Is that what we expect Boris Johnson to say? Because he ain't going to say that. He's on record as saying back in 2006 that it's Conservative Party policy that people should be able to buy and sell football clubs. Because it is. That's what they want. They want somebody to own the football club and to make profit from it. That is the official economic policy of the Conservative Party in England. So if we're looking for them to begin some socialist collective where the fans suddenly are given the opportunity to take power again, it ain't going to happen. That's why I have no faith that anything is going to come of this beyond a quiet truce. You remember the Germans and the Allies played football on New Year's Day? That's what's going to happen for a week or two. There'll be a bit of football played, some kind of funny photo ops where Agnelli and Sefrin meet, and maybe the godchildren are playing in front of them, and there's one of those one of those looks, and that's it. That's the end of this.
Yeah, like it is in the Conservative Party's interest, obviously, to play the tune that the crowd want to hear, and they've certainly done that for the last couple of days. But the policy changes we are talking about affecting in English football are at odds with the policies that the Conservative government would like to install in every walk of British life. It is a very un-Tory thing, the movement that has happened this week in English football, which I think leads me to agree with you that this isn't a movement that will go much further at all. When it comes to affecting real change, sure, there'll be fans out in the streets, but I guess this kind of comes back to, if you look at, say, one of the last two British general elections, there was like this general sense of shock when the votes came in, and it was like, hold on a minute, Twitter isn't actually a real indication of British life. Everybody on my Twitter feed was voting for Labour, and all of a sudden Labour haven't got in. Like, I wonder if actually when it comes down to the real important step on this, will things move in a very conservative manner? Like, your point about this being a little bit hypocritical about, I guess, the fact that capitalism has infected English football to the point of no return already is true, but it doesn't mean that you can't be unhappy with what the Super League represented as well. That, of course, we can accept how football has completely become an evil thing over the last 15 years in particular, but it doesn't mean it needs to become more evil.
Maybe. I mean, I feel like you haven't been paying attention if you've just woken up to this. And look, Johnny Lou says it's a great awakening has happened in English football, and maybe that's true. Maybe this is the start of a grassroots movement where everybody goes back to their local clubs and stops buying their kids Man United jerseys or Liverpool jerseys or whatever. Maybe. I would be hopeful that this will actually help improve people's connection with the League of Ireland, for example. But, like, I don't know. I mean, people in Ireland are getting very exercised about the match-going fans in another country. If you're a match-going fan from Ireland, you go to matches in England, fair play, you have 100% buy-in, I get that. But for the rest of us who watch our teams on the couch being that upset about the fact that there wasn't going to be relegation, even though the leagues themselves were probably not going to be that different. I mean, obviously the competitive balance because of the money would be changed, but maybe you could legislate around that. I don't know. It all felt like people, the outrage commodity reached its absolute peak. And what was everybody specifically angry about in retrospect?
It did reach its peak, but I was thinking, like, this is no... I hate to pick out Liverpool Football Club here, but it's the perfect example. I was thinking, when was the last time that Liverpool fans were as angry as this with John W. Henry? And they weren't as angry at this point, but they were angry with him in January when they didn't sign a high-quality enough centre-back. Now, it was nowhere near the anger that they were shown this week, but the last time Liverpool fans were angry with their owner was when they didn't sign a centre-back, when they didn't pay the money that comes from the grotesque capitalism that has infected football. We will 100% go back to a stage this summer where football fans are complaining about the top brass in their club not paying enough money for the newest superstar. Even Perez last night was saying, if we don't sign Mbappe this summer, I don't think any fan will shoot himself in the head. They know we're doing our best, and if things don't happen, it's because they're impossible. But then he also went on to say it's impossible to make signings like Mbappe and Haaland in general, not for Real Madrid, without the Super League. As if Mbappe and Haaland just don't exist without the Super League occurring. It is okay to have wealth spread out. It is okay to have superstars in more than 12 teams around Europe and have good football that exists in leagues that involve more than 20 people or more than 20 clubs. But
the thing is, from Perez's perspective, the Super League fixes the problem of the petro-billionaires because you can only have 11 players and suddenly you can compete with PSG. Like, there is a competitive imbalance which will begin to manifest itself as the clubs from the Gulf continue to pump their money in at a rate that we have now seen is close to bankrupting Barcelona and Juventus and Inter Milan. Like, what's happened is that the top tier of European football, this group of clubs has split, and at the very highest level are the nation states who can afford to pump in endless amounts of money because they're digging it out of the ground and they can't spend it fast enough. So I can see why, if you're Perez, there's an existential crisis around European football. I can see why, if you're Manchester United and the Glazers and John W. Henry, just see this as an opportunity to, like, bolt on the American system. But those European superpowers, they have absolutely no hope of competing for the Haaland and Mbappe type players in the future unless they're offering the same amount of money. And to me, that's the bit where the system is broken, and I don't know how to fix that. So, and I'm not sure we're going to do it at 7:45 this morning. But if anybody has any ideas, get in touch. 0879 180 180 is the WhatsApp number. OTB AM, live in association with Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette, giving you the confidence to tackle the day ahead. Will O'Callaghan, good morning to you.
Morning, lads. How you getting on?
Fix it, Will. Fix the football.
Yeah, good luck doing that. God, there's so many complex issues coming out of it. The one thing from listening to TV about, Irish fans having an opinion on the European Super League, the one thing I would say to that is that there's something on the line for Irish football here, which is the UEFA payments that come down from the Champions League that find their way into the FAI coffers each year. One of the effects, and I know the European Super League had kind of tentatively said, look, we'll create more money, and if there's more money, potentially there's more solidarity payments. But by the very nature of what the 15 clubs wanted to create, or the 12 founder clubs at least that we knew about, was that they wanted to suck as much of the money away for themselves from what they generate as opposed to giving it back to smaller leagues. And I think there would have been a genuine concern that because Irish teams aren't competing at Europe's top table, that we would have received far less money than Ireland were likely to get from UEFA. So from a purely Irish perspective, it's probably no bad news that UEFA are still in control of the game.
Okay, that's a fair point. Here's the thing, if I was in charge of the PR strategy for the European Super League, I would have come out and answered that and said, actually, we're going to be generating an extra 2 billion a year, we're going to hive off an extra 500 million for those. Do you know, there was definitely a way for them to answer that. I think if this had been executed properly, it's weird, the conspiracy theory that this was a deliberately failed attempt. I don't think that rings true. I don't think the public humiliation that John W. Henry was forced to sit through. If you read anything about him, he's a notoriously socially awkward human being. I can't imagine he enjoyed staring down the lens of a camera and apologising for wanting to make money. I can't see him voluntarily doing that just to get the reforms of the Champions League through, which weren't that they weren't that contentious. It was like that was always going to happen anyway. So,
but it might not have been to that extent. They didn't deliberately fumble, but they might have deliberately thought that this could be a stepping stone. They just didn't think that the stepping stone would end up leading to them having to go 10 steps backwards.
Maybe that's let's put this out here now and see where we get and see what. But it's been so rancorous. It's hard to see that there was strategy behind this, like a collective strategy. There is big news coming from GAA, or potentially big news. Well.
Yeah, Mayo very much sweating on the fitness of their captain, Aidan O'Shea. He'll require a scan after sustaining a knee injury in the first group training session back this week. Mayo begin the defence of their Connacht football title in under 9 weeks' time against Sligo. They've got the National Football League coming up in 3 weeks' time too. And one wonders, lads, if this is going to be the first big injury of a very shortened training period before we go into league and championship. And there is that extra disadvantage if you get injured this year. The qualifiers aren't there if you're a football county, and potentially if you get a bad injury in the next 3 weeks, your year is pretty much over.
And look, the strength and conditioning people, the physios have all been saying that the return to play needs to be graduated, it needs to be very carefully managed, particularly after whatever kind of layoff these players have had. So we really hope that he's okay, first off, and secondly, that this isn't the start of any more injuries too.
Yeah, well, Tom Ryan was saying last year, guys, that they looked at the injury claims, particularly that came in after the return in the summer. And even that was looking at club players as opposed to inter-county. They noticed a lot of soft muscle injuries that happened afterwards. And the argument was that people have been running their 5Ks, they've been doing their own work at their home gyms and whatever else. But it's very different when you step up that intensity to get ready for games. And I wonder if that's one of the compromises with the GAA calendar that they might come back to regret, because initially, and for a series of weeks, they were saying 5 to 6 weeks is what they wanted before the league came back. The hurling counties in particular says they were happy enough with 20 days. To me, it feels like a very short window to go from zero to that kind of level as quickly as they do. And I wonder if in the next few weeks as well, Ger, whether they'll consider having rolling substitutes or unlimited subs for the league for that very reason. Yeah,
and that's the thing, Will. It's coming from zero to this level pretty quickly. The counties who have honestly done that may actually be regretting playing by the rules for not coming back to collective training under the cover of darkness early in the morning a couple of months ago, for example, because those counties would probably have much more of a much bigger body of work done when it comes to their fitness and a much lower chance of injury.
Or indoors. Yeah. One of the rumours was one of the counties was training indoors, which was like, what? In the pandemic? Aerosol born? Okay. Right, what else is going on, Will?
Well, just 8 more points in their last 5 games will secure Man City the Premier League title, despite falling behind inside 20 seconds last night. Goals from Phil Foden and Rodri saw them beat Aston Villa 2-1. It moves City another big step closer to a 3rd crown in 4 seasons. Tottenham warmed up for the Carabao Cup final against City on Sunday with a win of their own. The interim reign of Ryan Mason began with a 2-1 victory at home to Southampton. Again, it boosts their hopes of finishing in the top 4. Leicester can give themselves some breathing room in that race tonight. Brendan Rodgers' side welcome a resurgent West Brom to the King Power. Relegation threatened Albion are aiming to make it 3 wins in a row as they try and close the gap to both Burnley and Brighton in the bid to stay up. Scottish Premiership champions Rangers remain unbeaten in the league this season. They drew 1-1 against St Johnstone last night. Lee Griffiths scored with the very last kick of the game as Celtic drew 1-1 against Aberdeen. Hibs will be playing European football next season after their 2-1 win against Livingston guaranteed them a top 4 finish. Republic of Ireland and Everton captain Seamus Coleman has praised the likes of Jordan Henderson and Marcus Rashford for speaking out against the European Super League this week. Key players from the so-called Big Six posted their objections to the breakaway tournament on social media before the English teams pulled out, which caused a domino effect. And Coleman says this week, if it's shown nothing else, has shown owners the power that's still held by supporters. The 6 clubs involved in the European Super League from England could still face sanctions from the Premier League despite backing out of the project. The English top flight will take its time to consider what action they'll take, they say, but it is understood, and in many of the newspapers this morning, that the Premier League Chief Executive Richard Masters has already contacted the 6 teams asking their officials who are sitting on the various committees to leave their posts. Also, in terms of the Euro 2020 delayed tournament, Ireland accepting that they're going to lose their Euro 2020 matches, but their Basque counterparts are fighting back. They say they will not respond to UEFA threats to take 4 games away from Bilbao. A decision on Dublin, Bilbao and Munich is not due until Friday afternoon, but the Basque government say they've already been told that they won't be hosting games, and they say they're now seeking legal advice.
Oh, wow. That's interesting. I just assumed that, like, look, you can't have it, away you go. But taking them to court.
Yeah, and like it's an interesting one for the lawyers when they take up this case, because I wonder under what grounds UEFA can say you have to have 25% capacity in order to actually host your games. Yeah, I mean, I wonder, maybe there's some stuff in the contract, maybe like Wimbledon, they foresaw that there will be a pandemic at some point and took out the insurance for it. I don't know, but that I didn't realise it. We wait with bated breath to see Ireland versus UEFA again. Could we get 5 million? Would that be about right? Is 5 million a good figure? Is anybody up for another 5 million? This time we'll go to the whole country, you know, a tenner check. No, it's a euro check, isn't it? It's like a euro check each. Yeah, the funny part about UEFA though, lads, is that apparently the Irish games, which are going to be lost, you know, Leo Varadkar pretty much admitted that yesterday, were due to go to Tottenham. I wonder if UEFA have now got a dirty bib with Tottenham after what happened with the Super League this week. But apparently the North London Stadium was due to get the 4 fixtures that would have been at the Aviva.
All right. It's the tentacles of this story will continue to wrap their way around the sports news for a long time to come. Well, good stuff. Thanks a million for that. It is 7:53 this morning. OTB AM live in association with Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette, giving you the confidence to tackle the day ahead. Here's what's coming up. Louise Galvin standing by. We're going to talk about Ireland-Italy in the Six Nations this weekend. Bringing through the sports pages at 8:05. We're going back to the Super League and the news that Celtic and Rangers may be about to be invited to play football south of the border with Tom English at 8:15. We have player ratings at 8:30. Our OTB TV picks with Sue at 8:45, and then we're going to reflect on the situation, the snafu. I can't actually explain what that means at this hour of the morning. That is the Super League with Joe and Stephen Doyle at around about 5:09. And we're going to your views too. We want to hear from you. 0879 180 180 is the WhatsApp number. And you can also use the hashtag OTB AM. Now, as I said, OTB AM is live in association with Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette, giving you the confidence to tackle the day ahead. Louise Galvin, good morning to you. How are you?
Good morning. I'm good, lads.
I think a European Super League in rugby would be a great idea.
Yeah, it would. If we get some club rugby off the ground, it'd be a great idea as well.
Yeah, that would definitely help. Look, Ireland are playing Italy this weekend, and all of a sudden this is one of those kind of fixtures that has a lot invested in the outcome. You know, I know we always talk about performance, particularly, you know, players who've been involved in teams always talk about performance and let the outcome look after itself. All of a sudden it feels like if you're in the coaching ticket this week, you don't really care about the performance, you just want that win.
Yeah, all of a sudden, a bit like the first game, we're really expecting a win with this game, but it's going to come out of performance, I suppose, key performance indicators like specifically the error count that the girls had the last day, if they can already start to cut down on that, it's all about getting the win, but it's how they do that is what Adam Griggs is going to be focusing on this week against Italy, because Italy are a good side and they're coming off the back of a good away win in Scotland. How
do we traditionally do against the Italians?
Yeah, so last year they were the only game we played in October from the rescheduled Six Nations games that were postponed from the start of the COVID pandemic. And we beat them 21-7. I think our girls had a lot more probably prep done coming into that game than the Italians had, and just looked much sharper on the day. The previous year we went to Parma and lost 29-27 in a high scoring battle in 2019, and we got the win in 2018. So it's been nip and tuck. They're definitely they're much stronger than their male counterparts, and what's particularly important is they're also vying for this last World Cup qualifying spot. So it's hugely important that we get another win on them, a back-to-back win, just to try and get that I suppose feeling of superiority over them when it comes to the World Cup qualifiers. But Italy are a very strong side. They like to play ball. They like to get over that gain line, throw offloads. I think that's where they probably fell down in October, in that when they weren't as sharp, those offloads weren't going to hand, or they weren't picking them at the, they weren't getting over the gain line and making the right choices when they were trying to offload the ball. And we all know then, that leads to a lot of errors and turnovers, and Ireland capitalised on that. But at the weekend, it was coming off pretty well for them. And although they suffered a bit of a whitewash defeat against England in the opening game, they actually played quite well. Defensively, they were quite strong for 50, 55 minutes. And the scoreline probably didn't reflect the actual game itself in that game. So they've been building nicely. Their momentum is going this direction. They've already had an away win. Whereas I suppose we started with a real peak and had a serious reality check last weekend. So it's really important that the girls dust themselves off, and, recovery started on Saturday afternoon, and they really need to refocus for this game, because it's not going to be easy.
Why did Ireland make so many errors last week in your view, Louise?
Look, there was a lot more pressure enforced. The line speed that France brought and that power and the tenacity was huge. And then that just has a consistently knock-on effect. So if you're getting hit behind the gain line, then all of a sudden your forward pod, you're setting up your next phase. Players are going to have to get deeper, work harder to try and bring an extra bit of momentum, get over the gain line, and they're getting hit behind the gain line again. So France brought a huge amount of pressure, and they had a really strong defensive system. But then on top of that, we just compounded errors upon errors. I think a few times we tried to throw an offload when we actually hadn't made gain line. We hadn't had a good strong carry and driven through. The offload wasn't on, and one in particular led to a French try. And then at times when that happens and you're starting to lose gain line and go backwards, maybe that's when you put boot to ball and you start to play a bit more territory rather than possession. And we probably were a bit slow to change our tactics that way as well. We came in with such confidence. I thought we were, I think the girls just thought we're just going to play out of this. But the French defence was just unrelenting. And that just led to more and more errors, which then led to frustration. And there was a certain amount of indiscipline as well. But the number one reason is pressure, French pressure.
The tactical reaction from Ireland is really interesting. Do Ireland have a game plan that fits their specific set of talents?
I think we do. I think in the first game we really showed that, okay, we're going to get solid front football, and then we're going to use some of the fantastic speed and footwork that we have out in that back line. We probably over-tried that without getting that front foot ball against France, and then we're just shifting it on. Once or twice that Bevan Parsons actually got the ball, often she was being double marked. Like there was even one time Stacey Flood came on, gave a beautiful skip pass to Eve Higgins, who is a fantastic player, who can really spot a gap herself, but you can nearly see she was conditioned to shift the ball to Bevan when actually Eve had half a gap and her player had already shifted on to double mark Bevan. So it's about playing that, go back to playing a little bit of heads up and people taking their own opportunities as well. But I think tactically, number one, we need to control the set piece and not give away as many penalties, as many turnovers. A little bit slow to the breakdown as well against France, a little bit less aggressive. So again, France or Italy are pretty good around the breakdown as well. So they'll have spotted that as a weakness. Now, having said that, in Italy, considering they won 41-20 against Scotland, they still had 15 turnovers of their own. Again, if you play that offloading game, you do have a tendency sometimes to have a higher error count. But again, that's where the girls can capitalise and either try and shift the ball quickly and actually try and play from those and try and hit them on the counter, or just try and set her up, get our set piece going, work our way into the game, get front football, and then work off first, second phase set piece like we tried to do against Wales and like we did well against Wales.
What do you do about the confidence this week? And you mentioned the sense of momentum, like the competition is so short. It's good to hear that it's possible. The Italians obviously felt that it was possible to recover very quickly from their defeat against England, but at least they had the start of that game to kind of cling on to and point to and say, look, our defence was strong. This team that we're coming up against this week, they're nowhere near the same. What does the team this week do to try and zap away the France performance and lean back on the original performance?
Yeah, look, a lot of these girls, they'll have a professional mindset, and we hear Ciara Griffin saying in the interview, recovery started pretty much ASAP as soon as the final whistle went. They'll have been disappointed with themselves, disappointed with the performance, disappointed with some of the individual decision and the team errors as well. So they'll be very keen to go out and, completely change the tune and leave this Six Nations, this tournament, in a positive light. And they see themselves as being third outright, and I think they are, but they have to prove that against their biggest contenders for that spot, which is Italy this weekend. It's a nice little bonus to be playing at home as well. But I think you just have to look at what went well against France. Like, I don't think the scoreline is where the two teams are at. I think France are ahead, but I don't think they're 56-15 ahead with 2 no-phase tries from turnovers. It was like a sevens game. We can't let that happen again. So I think there's a lot that's fixable within a short space of time, because it's not necessarily huge system errors. It's just some individual errors, some individual poor decision making, and just they look back to what they did against Wales. They look back at what they did against Italy in October, and they look to rectify a lot more of that type of play. So they know the Italian girls, that they're not a very new team. They have a lot of them that are quite experienced, which again is a positive for them. But it means there should be nothing, I suppose, nothing coming out of the bag that the girls won't expect. And just going back to basics, stop turning over the ball, don't have poor discipline, and then try and get your set piece going. And then once we get that front football and we earn the right to play, I'd back our backs against theirs any day of the week. Do
you make Ireland slight favourites, it sounds like?
I think certainly having the game switched back to Donnybrook, even though I know we don't have any crowds or anything like that, but I think that gives us an extra bit of a boost. And the fact that it's almost like a replication of the game that happened in October. Yeah, I do make us favourites. And I think, I don't mean that to put pressure on the girls, but I think they'd be saying that themselves. They want to, they believe they're a better team than the Italian squad, but they're going to have to come out and perform and prove it.
After every defeat that this team suffers, Louise, there is seemingly a big conversation about amateurism and semi-professionalism, especially when they come up against the likes of France and England. How do you think the player group react to those eternal questions, it seems like? Because it is such an easy thing to point to after a big defeat like last Saturday, but at the same time, it's the same conversation over and over again. Yeah, it is. And I think, look, going back to your first point to that, how do the players react? It's not in their control. You can only control how you prepare yourself individually, how you've learned from the previous game, how physically and mentally prepared you are for the next game. And that has nothing to do with it. So that's how they prepare for it. You have to completely block that out and just not entertain any chat about it, because it's irrelevant at this point in time. And it's for other people, I suppose, sound bites to talk about. And I think as well, like, a lot has been made of the whole professionalism, the money side of things. Like, France wouldn't have had a huge amount more of time together than the girls had in their camps. But what France have is an incredibly strong club structure, a huge amount of girls playing the game, and they're all playing from a younger age. So as much as it is important to have, I suppose, when we're looking at trying to level the playing field in terms of how prepared our squad are, it's not just about throwing a ball of money at the current 30, 35 players that are involved in the Six Nations squad. I mean, for example, if Adam Griggs if he picked up, God forbid, 5 or 6 injuries last weekend, and he didn't want to necessarily go with some of the girls out of that 35-player squad, and he didn't want to take any more from the 7 squad because he's
taken a lot of players out of there already. Any other player outside of those squads hasn't been playing rugby since the AIL didn't fully start up. They started a community series which finished last October. So due to whereas all these other countries have had club, it's been obviously it's been broken, and at times they've had to stop, but they've had a lot more ongoing club. And even the priority of getting the domestic game up and running, that's way down the priority list, and that's a huge problem as well as getting our younger girls playing. It's what are our breakthrough players and current players playing at, what level are they playing at, and as well the visibility and the opportunities that the current international squad gets. So it's not just about making this squad professional. There's a whole other I suppose range of issues beneath it all.
There's one other rugby story this morning. The Examiner are reporting, and they would know that John O'Gibbs is potentially on his way to Claremont to replace Frank Azima as head coach, which obviously would leave a vacancy at La Rochelle for somebody to run both the rugby operations and be head coach. And they're suggesting that O'Gara is close to settling his medium-term future, Simon Lewis reports, with a commitment to La Rochelle for the next 3 years. So that would be a significant increase in his responsibility for all of the rugby operations and his long-term future, medium-term future, long-term, 3 years is long in professional sport tied down. It's great for him, and I know obviously people were saying that it would be great to get him back to Munster and it would be great to get him in the Irish setup, but actually the more coaches we have operating at that level, the better for Irish rugby in the long term.
Yeah, exactly. The more experience he gets working at that level that he can bring back, that we hope he can bring back eventually, the better. So why not? He's obviously in a good spot within the club. He's done fantastic. And just, I know a lot of people are, obviously, Rog is well known for his tactical nuance but it's a lot of, recently we're getting an insight into that culture that he creates. That's huge. That's phenomenal. That's the sort of stuff you can't buy. And if he can, when you're the head coach, you lead that culture within a squad, the senior squad. But if you're going above that, more towards directing rugby operations, that actually peters down to the culture within the whole staff, playing staff, underage development. So you have a huge amount of influence and a huge amount of responsibility. But if he can harness that experience and bring it back to Ireland, we'll be all the better for it.
Louise, good stuff. Thanks a million. Cheers.
Cheers, guys.
Louise Galvin giving us some thoughts on Ireland, Italy at the weekend, and the news this morning that Ronan O'Gara appears, according to the Examiner, close to committing his future to La Rochelle for the next 3 seasons. It's 7 minutes past 8. If you want to get in touch with us, we'd love to hear from you. 0879 180 180. We're going to talk about the European Super League, the impact on Scottish football, and the potential news that has come in the last 24 hours that the possibility of Celtic and Rangers playing south of the border has now been put firmly back on the table. Right back after these.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
The Saturday panel on OTB.
And I find myself during commentary, sometimes a thread will appear in my mind and it'll be like a worm. It's there. I know this might happen and I've got it ready to go. And that would have been the nation holds its breath thing, because I couldn't have scripted that penalty in Genoa in 1990. And it just came to me in the moment. But it came to me because of all that I had done beforehand. And it was there ready to emerge at the right moment.
Don't miss the panel every Saturday afternoon on OTB Sports Radio. Tune in 24/7 on the OTB Sports app.
Check out the Boyle Sports app today for details on which football match is getting the no-lose treatment this week. Plus, browse through dozens of new player markets, all powered by Opta. Shots on target, left foot, right foot, headed goals, assists and more. See the Boyle Sports app for full T's and C's. Boyle Sports. This is betting. Gamble responsibly. See gamblingcare.ie 18+.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.
There's only one story still on the sports pages. The Irish Times, their headline there, United, Liverpool and City seek forgiveness for a fiasco. That's Jamie Jackson of The Guardian story. And then European Super League may have died a death, but the cartel lives on. That's Jonathan Liu again of The Guardian. That's his story. We've talked about that a little bit earlier on as well. The war has been won, but who will win the peace is the headline over Tommy Martin's piece. I think the battle might have been won. I'm not sure if the war has been won just yet, because this is an ongoing story. Hiss off is the back page of the Star this morning. Fans demand chop for Prem snakes. Good of Zephyrin to use the word snakes so that the headline writers can really take advantage of it, to be honest. And the back page of the Irish Sun is United Snakes of America. It's a lot of anti-American sentiment coming through from the English newspapers this morning. And we want Old Firm in new Super League. Super Leagues are bad, except when it's our Super League, seems to be the headline. Jurors and Hoops in demand. This is a story in the Sun this morning. Tom English of BBC Scotland is with us this morning. Tom, good morning to you. How are you?
All right, yourself?
Well, we booked you yesterday just to chat generally about how Scottish football was being left behind, and lo and behold, overnight, a breaking story that makes us look like the best guest bookers in the world. So our timing is excellent. So is yours.
Well, I think story in inverted commas. Yeah, you know, I've read it. A club source says, I mean, it's interesting. A club source says they want Celtic and Rangers in the new British League. But another club source says that they don't want any more than 18 teams in this league. So that's 4 of the current Premier League Premiership will have to move out to make way for Celtic and Rangers in a new 18-team league. I'm sorry for my scepticism, but I think it's rubbish.
Turkey's not notoriously known for voting for Christmas.
Yeah, and look, this thing is as old as the hill. Celtic and Rangers going to England 20 years ago, coming up for the 20th anniversary. Dermot Desmond, majority shareholder of Celtic, obviously, said a British League will happen inevitably. The ball is already rolling, and there's been preliminary discussions. That was summer 2001. And it keeps cropping up every time he does an interview, which is not very often. He's asked about Celtic and Rangers joining the Premier League. And every time he says, yeah, it's inevitable. I said it in 2009, 2015, 2020, 2021, earlier on this year. It's never going to go away. It never happens, but people never stop talking about it.
Why does it not happen, as a matter of interest? What's your instinct on that? Because you can see for the bigger teams in the Premier League that Celtic and Rangers aren't actually a threat. They're an opportunity.
Yeah, but they are a threat. They're a threat to, it all goes back to money, isn't it? Greed is the word of the week, the buzzword. And it is, as you said, Turkey's voting for Christmas. You know, why would the Premiership clubs vote, Premier League clubs vote for Celtic and Rangers? It means that there's 2 spots taken up that they could have. And why would the authorities in this country vote for Celtic and Rangers to leave? That's their TV deal, as paltry as it is, obliterated in one sweep. So it'd be like La Liga voting for Real Madrid and Barcelona to leave. I mean, why would you do that? Like,
unless it is separate to a vote entirely, and it is, like we've seen this week, some sort of breakaway. What would the Scottish public reaction to that be?
Well, it's a good question. You know, there's been as much moral indignation in Scotland about the European Super League as anywhere else. But if you ask Celtic and Rangers fans, well, what about a British Super League? A lot of them would go, oh yeah, we'd be up for that. so as you said earlier on in the intro, if it's their Super League, no. If it's our Super League, oh yeah, well maybe. You know, it's hypocrisy left, right, and centre. Throughout this week, we've seen hypocrisy all over the shop.
What's been your take on this week, as a matter of interest?
Look, a lot of shock and horror and outrage, and that's understandable. But like, football invited the capitalists in a long time ago, so we shouldn't be surprised when capitalists behave like capitalists. I mean, it's like inviting a pig into your house and then being shocked that he's eating all your furniture. It's a pig. What do you expect it to do? And I mean, you know, the hypocrisy is breathtaking. Sky Sports are now apparently the moral guardians of the game. Gary Neville is Mother Teresa. Sky Sports opened the door to all of this when they sparked a breakaway and shafted the old football league in the process. I think they pay about 3.6 billion in their current deal for the Premier League. They pay about 9 or 10 million pounds per Premier League game. And the transfer fees and the wage inflation and the oligarchs and the sheikhs and the billionaires, it can all be traced back in a major way to Sky Sports and the breakaway. But we have Gary Neville, and I think Gary Neville is a fantastic pundit. I love watching him talk about football. But he's been lauded as the man of the people here. While, pontificating on a subscription-only channel that played a big part in creating the culture that he's railing against. It's amazing. Everything about this has been amazing.
It is true. Everything about this has been absolutely amazing. And it is the story that keeps on giving, to the point where it emerged yesterday. This conglomeration of billionaires organised a PR company on Sunday afternoon for a launch on Sunday evening. It's like, what?
Yeah, it's amateur. No wonder all these clubs are billions in debt. I mean, if this is the way they do their business, no wonder they're all in financial trouble. Florentino Perez, I don't want to be unkind to a 74-year-old man, but he's come across as a man in dotage. It's the stuff last night in Spain, the interview he did in Spain last night, remarkable stuff. I mean, someone needs to take him aside and say, look, Florentino, just take a break here, because he's embarrassing himself. And like, we hear that this is a great victory for football, and of course it is. The death of the Super League, if it is the death of the Super League, is a victory for football. And we hear, we've got our game back. But the game you're getting back is still controlled by the billionaires. They haven't gone away. Abramovich and Henry and Sheikh Mansour and the Glazers. They haven't gone away. I mean, they've bottled it this time. But they'll probably try again.
Yeah, that's the thing.
And a note, like when they're doing all of these, John Henry doing his mea culpa yesterday, he's not apologising for delivering a garbage idea, lamentably executed. He's not apologising for the greed. He's apologising for causing disruption. He's not saying we'll never revisit this again. He's just saying, sorry about that, lads. So there's no reassurances from him that they're not going to try this stroke again, because that's what they do. And like, we're all kind of a little bit complicit. I mean, I'm a Liverpool fan. I thought John Henry was the greatest thing since sliced bread when Liverpool won the European Cup and won the Premier League. Virgil van Dijk, 75 million. Alisson, all the big money signings. I want more big money signings. But that's part of the problem. We have created a culture now where everybody wants more and more and more, and that includes fans.
There's very few Manchester City fans who have any problem with their ownership. We saw the Newcastle fans really desperate for Saudi investment. That's what gave me the sense that if this did happen, if it had been handled properly, if the idea had been floated, if they'd got some of the pundits on board early on, so there was a debate about it, this could easily have happened. Like, it's not beyond the bounds of possibility that a good PR campaign, well thought out, a structured, slow, steady release with a few chosen journalists who break the story, that they're thinking about this. Oh no, we're just thinking about it. We have a few ideas. Yeah. What do you guys all think about it? Oh, it's terrible. But what about if we did this? The football fans at those big clubs would have been like, so I'll get the same league games I get every weekend, and every Thursday night you're guaranteeing me one of the best teams in world football up against my team, and I have no chance of getting around. That sounds pretty good to me. Do you know, like, football fans, very fickle, could easily have been brought through this in a way. It's just that it was so cack-handed.
It was extraordinarily cack-handed. And it's just further proof, not that we needed it, but anyway, it's there, that these guys haven't a clue and don't care about the way football fans think. They thought this would wash. They thought it would wash because they didn't understand the culture. They understand the money. That's all they understand. And we shouldn't be surprised by that, because that's what they are. Money is what they are. They're not about sentiment. They're not about history. They're not about the fans, even though they kind of say they are. I mean, if anyone who believes that, if you believed it then, you're a fool. If you believe it now, you're a bigger fool. They don't care about the fans. They want fans of the future. So they want people all over the world sitting in front of their laptops watching streams of games. That's who they're interested in. And they're not apologizing for that. They're still not apologising for that. So it's, I mean, you look at the world we live in now, and because Eddie Howe, there's a lot of talk of Eddie Howe coming to Celtic, so I've been looking into Eddie Howe, and everyone has been looking into Eddie Howe, and his Bournemouth time in anticipation, perhaps, of him being announced Celtic manager, and Bournemouth, the money that Bournemouth has spent. I mean, in microcosm, you can see the finance and the greed and the distortion of English football in Bournemouth. Between July 2018 and August 2019, Bournemouth spent 120 million in the transfer market, and then they got relegated. Now, Bournemouth, I've been to Bournemouth's ground. It's just like a slightly souped up version of the Markets Field.
I just Googled 11,329 capacity. 11,329 is the capacity of the Vitality Stadium.
I mean, I went there a few years ago to interview Ryan Fraser when he was still playing for Bournemouth. And I was told, be prepared, this is a very small stadium. I couldn't believe how small it was. I mean, honestly, it was tiny. And everything about it was tiny. I was at a press conference there. There was 5 journalists at the press conference. There'd have been 50 journalists at a Celtic press conference the same week.
Are we wrong that we don't see that as the embodiment of the British version of the American dream, where even plucky little Bournemouth with their 11,000 capacity, they can spend 120 million in 18 months?
Yeah,
that's the dream.
That's the dream. That's it. That's what, and we sell this dream, and we kid ourselves. Oh, little Bournemouth doing it against the odds. 120 million quid. A lot of it badly spent, by the way.
Jordan Ibe.
Yeah. I mean, Dominic Solanke scored a few goals in the championship, but they spent 20 million. They didn't spend 20 million on him to score goals in the championship. 15 million here, 10 million there. Extraordinary. And this could be repeated, not throughout the Premier League, but in various parts of it. And no wonder the thing is in the state it's in. And that there will be a lot of football fans, certainly in Scotland, because Scotland, obviously, there's no money in the Scottish League. We're looking on this week with something approaching glee and hoping and a curse on all their answers. Because, some English clubs come to Scottish clubs and they take their players for like a Virgil van Dijk, a Kieran Tierney, a John McGinn, all these players that have gone down for smaller fees. And their clubs, the fans of these clubs, feel like they've been undersold because the lure of the Premier League and the glamour of the Premier League is too much for the good Scottish players or players based in Scotland to resist. And the lure of the Premier League is based on money and clubs spending way too much money because of the culture, because of, I hate to go back to Sky Sports again, but it does go back to Sky Sports. And this ridiculous spectacle of Sky railing against greed. I mean, this is jumping the shark, baby.
It's been a weird week. It really has been a weird week. Not that I have sympathy for Fiorentina Perez, but I have a sense that the desperation that they have, that Barcelona have, that Inter, who are 600 million odd in debt, that Juve, who are struggling financially, that all of those clubs have, is that they're looking at Paris Saint-Germain and they're looking at Manchester City and to a lesser extent maybe Chelsea and going, we cannot compete with this into the future. Yeah. The miracle of the 3 Champions Leagues that Zidane won when his team weren't the best in Europe, but they were an amazing cup team. Obviously there's a financial cost in the background to that. That's unsustainable. And they do see that the future is that the petrodollars make the entire Champions League. Over the course of every couple of years, they might win from time to time. But over the next 2 decades, how often are we actually going to see Manchester City win? How often are we actually going to see Paris Saint-Germain win? Most of the time, probably. Eventually, that kind of reaches that point. Unless Bayern Munich somehow, because of the weird way that German football is set up, can be there. But you can see how Real Madrid would be like, actually, we can't compete with this. So that's their desperation for the European Super League. And in some ways, while he's saying that, and it looks ludicrous, that this is just a pause, this is on standby, I can see them trying to get this back in 5 years' time with a much better thought out plan.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Florentino Perez says last night in Spain that, maybe we didn't present it properly, we didn't market it properly. That's their regret. Their regret is not the idea. Andrea Agnelli still calls it a beautiful idea. So they haven't learned their lesson. The lesson that they have learned is we should have sold this better. Not that this is a dud.
Do you think they're right though, Tom? I think that I don't think that the world of football really has that much of an issue. The reason I don't think the world of football has that much of an issue with it is because the new Champions League isn't that different. It's a little bit different in that Leicester can qualify. But if Man United don't qualify, they're still getting in. If Chelsea or Arsenal, well, not Arsenal, sorry. If Chelsea don't qualify, they're still getting in. It's not that different.
No, but this is, I mean, people were portraying this as good v evil, right v wrong. What it was money v money. And the new Champions League, as you say, UEFA's new Champions League, there's a safety net in there for the elite. So, like, for example, if this new Champions League with its 100 extra games and all the revenue that will bring in, if this was starting now or next week, Liverpool in 7th place in the Premier League would be given a wild card, and West Ham, who are in 5th, would be in the Europa League. So it's the big boys getting looked after. It's a Super League of a different bent, but it comes from the same place. More money, protectionism for the big boys, or the supposed big boys, and more games, more of everything, bigger, just to satisfy. This is the creation of this new Champions League from 2024. It's purely to satisfy the European Super League clubs. Again, they haven't won the big victory this week, but they've won a small victory by this new Champions League.
As a fallback position, it's not bad.
Do you think, Tom, that the role of the fans will change in the view of the fans? It may not change at all, but do you think that there'll be a greater sense of importance? They'll feel, God, we've actually affected something this week. They may not have affected anything, it may be completely different reasons, but maybe that hypocrisy that you speak about there, which has existed in football for so long, maybe people become wise to it. We did see footballers wearing the shirts in their anti-Qatar protest a couple of months ago. I'm not sure that happens for a Qatar World Cup that takes place 10 years ago, for example. Are the players, are the supporters more aware of all these different things that are at play in football?
I think they are, and certainly the supporters stood up in a spectacular way, and they forced this, no doubt about it. And it was supporter power and player power. Some of the players that spoke out very powerfully. But my concern is that it'll just revert. It'll revert to supporters wanting more big money players, and forgetting how a club might get the big money player. And they get the big money player because they've got a billionaire in there. And a billionaire says, well, if you want the big money player, where do you think the money is going to come from? It's going to come from a European Super League. So if you want this world where you have all of these Galacticos, don't complain about how we create this world for you. And it's kind of goes around in circles. But I can see that, the Arab Spring of football, if you like. I could see fans of most clubs, not all, but fans of a lot of clubs in 6 months or a year saying, no, we're not spending enough money on the transfer market. We need more. We need big players. What are you doing about this, Stan Kroenke? What are you doing about this, Joel Glazer?
The best person in the world to be right now is Erling Haaland, who's looking, which of you billionaires needs to overpay me now to pacify your fan base, buddies? Come on down. Back the Brinks truck. Yeah.
Blank check for the lad. Write your own number, Erling.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see if this Arab Spring maintains, because maybe it can, and maybe I'm just being too cynical about the impact of it. And I don't know. There's been talk here, Tom, about it's a good time for the League of Ireland to position itself as an umbilical link with your local community. These players, they are not getting paid fortunes. They're essentially doing it because they do love playing football and it's a job for them, but they're representing your community. Is there something similar happening in Scotland where I mean, it's the worst time in the world for fans not to be able to go and see local football. But is there any hope that this has a knock-on impact for Motherwell and St Johnstone and Cowdenbeath and whoever?
Well, look, what we're seeing a lot of in Scotland during coronavirus is clubs kind of engaging or re-engaging with their communities. I mean, the vast majority of clubs in Scotland, and there's 42 of them in the 4 divisions, are community clubs. And they do a terrific job in their community, most of them. And they've done more of that during coronavirus, or at least more of that has been reported. A lot of these clubs will say, we do all this stuff all the time, but you're too obsessed with Celtic and Rangers to bother with us. And there is a lot of truth in that, actually. So what we're seeing during the lockdown, even though the whole coronavirus thing was horrific, in a little football world, we're seeing an awful lot of good stories that remind us of the power of football at that basic level. Stenhousemuir, a club, fantastic community work, like really, really good, helping out people in the community, looking after people, and have become more of a pillar of their community on the back of all of this. That can't be forgotten as well. So there's many different football worlds. There's the European Super League, which has appalled everybody this week. And then there's, say, Stenhousemuir and many other clubs like it. And there'll be clubs in Ireland as well, like Stenhousemuir, who are doing good stuff. But we're not that bothered with their good stuff because we want to be appalled by the bad stuff.
Yeah, no, it's true. One last thing, the delicious possibility of Jose Mourinho being the new Celtic boss was floated this week. What are the chances of this?
Well, do you know, after Brendan Rodgers, it was mooted that Dermot Desmond had met Jose Mourinho. And that rumour has never really gone away. I heard that from a couple of different people in Ireland, actually.
Well, Jose's got an Irish agent or manager, so it's not a million miles away. It's pretty easy to make that link.
It is pretty easy to make that link, and he was out of a job at the time and all the rest of it. But it didn't happen. I can't see it. I would love to see it because it would be hilarious. And I think it would be a disaster for Celtic and for Mourinho, I think. But I can't see it. I mean, obviously Eddie Howe has been the front runner, but that's gone on a long time now, and there's still no announcement. There's talk of Chris Wilder coming into the picture, but there's still no smoke at Celtic Park, and I think the fans are getting increasingly agitated. They got knocked out of the cup by Rangers at the weekend. 20-odd points behind. Well, the league is over, but they've been humiliated by Rangers this season. And there's so much work to do at Celtic. It's not just the manager. The entire team needs to be rebuilt. And I don't think there's the kind of money there to rebuild it that Jose would get excited about. So as much as I'd like to see it, and Roy Keane and all the other box office names, I would doubt it.
All right, good stuff. Thanks a million for joining us, Tom. Cheers. Always great to talk to you.
Cheers, lads.
Tom English from BBC Scotland there. The breaking news in rugby this morning is that Claremont have officially confirmed that John O'Gibbs will rejoin the club as head coach this summer. So John O'Gibbs was obviously the director of rugby at La Rochelle, and in the papers today they're reporting that Ron O'Gara will assume, the Examiner are reporting specifically that Ron O'Gara will assume John O'Gibbs' title, and that's a promotion for him, have full control of all of the rugby output there, that O'Gara has a good relationship with the club president at La Rochelle. And you've got to say, that's, I think, brilliant news for O'Gara. He's going to be there for the next 3 years. It's one of the best jobs in French rugby at the moment. He's doing a sensational job. And I know there's a big cry for the IRFU to make a play to get him involved now. But, he's 44, right? So if he comes back and gets involved in the Ireland setup, where else do you go? The track record of former Ireland coaches going on to other big rugby coaching jobs. I mean, eventually Declan Kidney is back with London Irish, but it took him a while to get there. We saw Eddie O'Sullivan flit around the place, and he's in media now. We saw Joe Schmidt take a job with the IRB, essentially. And, from a career perspective, I think this is great news for Ron O'Gara.
Yeah, he's doing a phenomenal job, and I think his age, where he's clearly loving this job, why would you want to go into international coaching, for example? I know that the connection is with Munster as much as it is with Ireland at times, but this is something that's going really well for him. Why not dig in and make this thing an actual legacy for himself in a brilliant part of the world, in something that seems to just really excite him? Every time you listen to Ronan O'Gara, he seems unbelievably excited by whatever has just happened. Like that interview on BT Sport after their two wins ago in the Champions Cup, you could almost just feel the energy popping off him when he was talking. He gets a massive endorphin rush from effective coaching, and I'm sure that just feeds into his players as well. I'd say he's a brilliant coach to work under. So
just to recap, Claremont themselves have reported the news that John O'Gibbs will be their head coach next season. I mean, John O'Gibbs is obviously somebody who might get involved in Irish rugby at some point again, given his connections with Leinster back in the day. But all of a sudden, the O'Gara career path has been totally vindicated. The team are playing sensational rugby. His reputation has never been better, and it's great that we have somebody out there cutting their teeth and succeeding in the way that he is. So obviously it hasn't been confirmed yet that he's going to take over Gibbs' job, but that's what the Examiner are saying, that he's in the mix for a 3-year deal, tying that down. So we obviously wish him the very best with that. 0879 180 180 is the WhatsApp number here if you want to get in touch with us this morning. We're going to come back to the Super League a little bit later on with Stephen Doyle and Joe Molloy, talking about the story itself, how it unfolded, where next, what the implications are for Irish football in all the different tentacles of this. Maybe it's just a bunch of stuff that happened and nothing else is going to happen now beyond the new Champions League, but perhaps this is some kind of Arab Spring for football fans. Right, it is 8:36 this morning. We're going to bring you our Super League player ratings on OTB AM in just a minute. First, here's Simon Cooper speaking with Joe last night about the football owners who led the charge on the Super League this week.
It's amazing, isn't it? I mean, the thing is, I've tried to break it down because over the years I've interviewed a lot of these club presidents or senior executives, and I think you've got to see various groups. You've got the kind of Americans who they care about profit. They're not all the brightest spark in the box. You know, John Henry's very clever, but the Glazers are heirs. Stan Kroenke of Arsenal, the Milan owner, Singer. So you have 4 Americans who just think, well, we don't really care what the fans think. We live in mansions in the US. We don't really go much to Europe anyway to watch games. We'll just do it. It's about profits. Then you have someone like Agnelli, who's an heir who fancies himself as a brilliant businessman. You have Florentino Perez, who thinks, well, I'm the dictator of Real Madrid. I can do what I want. But after that, you get to the soft underbelly of people who are less excited. So the oligarchs and sheikhs, the Chelsea, Man City people, they think, well, we don't really want this because we don't want to make any money out of football. We just want to throw a lot of money at football. They only go into the Super League because the other big clubs are there. And then you have Barcelona, where, you know, the president wakes up every morning and worries what the fans are thinking. You know, it's a member-owned democracy. When he figured out that the fans didn't like it, he was getting out of there. The Atletico Madrid owner, Miguel Gil, also an heir who fancies himself as a businessman, he doesn't want to annoy the fans because he lives near Madrid. He's not, you know, John Henry lives 3,000, 5,000 miles away. The Atletico Madrid guy, he actually lives in town. He doesn't want to upset people. So once you got all these clubs peeling off, then the hardcore was left alone. The profit-making Americans were kind of left alone.
Okay, that's the geopolitical aspect of it. But what about the player ratings? Everybody is paying attention to this. We know that when they wake up tomorrow, this morning, and are having their whatever a posh breakfast is, that these billionaires want to know, how did they do in Eoin Sheahan's player ratings?
It's true. You have the Irish Times there. It's got the faces of all the people involved in this, and we're going to rate 9 of them today to see how they actually did perform. There they are. So we're going to start with that man right, 2 from the right at the top row there, Andrea Agnelli. So we're going to give all these players a rating out of 10. Andrea Agnelli, we're going to start off with a big fat 0, because general rule of thumb in life, if you've used your daughter's christening to achieve career progression, you're probably not doing life right. He is the first person to stab someone in the back only to end up injuring himself in the process. Like, do you remember in Game of Thrones when Theon Greyjoy took over Winterfell, but then a short time afterwards ended up getting captured and tortured episode after episode after episode? That is what's after happening to Andrea Agnelli here. He tried to capture football and he ended up getting captured himself and tortured repeatedly all week. It's a big fat 0. He failed. Next up, Florentino Perez. Perez gets a 3. So why is Perez getting a higher score than Agnelli when they're both to blame for this? Well, Perez, I'm sure you'll agree, deserves 3 full points for his ability to take the piss out of Tottenham, even when his career is being irreparably damaged. So here he is on Spanish TV being asked to name the 6 Premier League teams in in the Super League.
Manchester United, Manchester City, Liverpool, Arsenal, Chelsea y Tottenham. Oiga, no son...
Yeah, Florentino Perez has spent every waking moment this week trying to destroy football, and yet he's still had time to absolutely bury Tottenham Hotspur. So Florentino Perez gets 3. Not a bad outcome. Next up, Ed Woodward. Ed Woodward gets a 2. It is all swings and roundabouts being the face of Manchester United's boardroom. You know, if you're going to enjoy the glory of signing Morgan Schneiderlin for €30 million, then you've got to take the hit on weeks like this. He does get a couple of bonus points because Manchester United now have almost 2 million TikTok fans, and he's also now allowed to move out of Joel Glazer's basement. Next up is Daniel Levy, who gets an 8 out of 10. It is quite the score for Daniel Levy because, like an Olympic diver, he has managed to make barely a ripple on the news scene as he shoved Jose Mourinho overboard this week. When it came to the Super League, well, on the mantelpiece in the Levy household is a framed screenshot of a Zoom meeting involving Daniel and Florentino and Andrea and all the boys. It may have been the only Zoom meeting they ever had, but these are the things that Tottenham fans will sing about for years to come. Next up, you've got Stan Kroenke, who gets a 6. It's a little bit of a sympathy score here for Stan. Arsenal fans are like, where is Kroenke? We need to hear from Stan. But not a lot of people notice. Stan Kroenke is actually a monk. He took a vow of silence when he took over Arsenal and now spends his days wearing robes and hoping the world will soon find itself. He is a man to be respected, and he's probably praying for you all right now in silence. Stan Kroenke, well done. You get a 6 out of 10. Next up, it's one of the big scorers again. It's Alexander Ceferin. He gets a score of 9, the greatest hit rate against snakes since St. Patrick himself. Now, the difference between Ceferin and St. Patrick is that the snakes in Ireland in the 4th century weren't complete idiots, and Ceferin didn't need magic superpowers to banish the snakes from his land. Ceferin had something way stronger. He had a 36-team Champions League format, which is actually going to help increase the gap between the big clubs and the small clubs. A masterstroke of a week from Ceferin, 9 out of 10. Next up, with a score of 7, is Roman Abramovich. Pretty good score. He showed the world what good he has and what good he can do and what good there is in his heart by getting out of the ESL before everyone else. Yes, he may be an extremely rich man, but some extremely rich men happen to be good guys too. When he looked around the room and saw the people he was dealing with, he knew he had to pull out because Roman Abramovich only deals with good people. That is right. Roman Abramovich only keeps friends in high places that are very good and have hearts of gold. Roman Abramovich gets a 7 out of 10 for his work. It is also a 7 out of 10 this morning for Sheikh Mansour. Now, this is a good score based on pure relatability. Sheikh Mansour is one of us. He is human, and sometimes he makes mistakes. Sometimes he does things by accident. Sometimes he accidentally takes out a fork at a drawer instead of a spoon for his cereal. Sometimes he accidentally signs up to a €4 billion league funded by JP Morgan, capable of destroying the entire football pyramid. Sheikh Mansour, just one of the lads. His signature was just resting on the dotted line. And finally, Nasser Al-Khelaifi, head of Paris Saint-Germain, gets a score of 10 out of 10. A masterful performance all week from the president of PSG. He basically played a role of knight in shining armour, rided into town to become the new president of the ECA just last night, actually. PSG, of course, do not care about being owned by a country with horrific human rights abuses, because why would you? But a football league with no relegation? God, well, sometimes you just have to take a stand. And fair play to Paris Saint-Germain, fair play to Al-Khelaifi. He is the highest scorer this week in the player ratings with a perfect 10 out of 10.
10 out of 10. OTB AM is live in association with Gillette. Good morning start with Gillette, giving you the confidence to tackle the day ahead. If you'd like to quibble with those player ratings, or indeed if you're one of the lawyers working for those, then you can get in touch with Eoin directly on Twitter. Just slide into his DMs for that one. Right, I'm going to tell you what's coming up in OTB Sports Radio in just a moment. But first, some comments. Eamon says, why are Spurs being treated like the trigger of the group? Top 4 seasons in a row in a Champions League final. I watched a sketch from Conor Moore that had Levy down as the idiot at the table. He's the sharpest chairman around. Why this condescending attitude to Spurs? Levy had to go with the rest. What else could he do? You know, he's just there doing what he had to do. I think because Spurs would not be considered a European superpower, but in fairness, the performance of Spurs under Pochettino had been a team who was progressing to the point where they were probably justified in thinking they should be in a European Super League. And then they got rid of that manager and replaced him with Jose Mourinho in one of the most Spursy things that's happened in recent years. They've wasted the peak years of one of the best strikers in world football, and it looks like, I don't know what's going to happen next. I don't want to second guess. Maybe they're about to uncover some genius manager who will use Harry Kane and catapult themselves back into teams who are into being a team who's in the semi-finals of the Champions League as a matter of course. But I'm just not sure.
It does seem as well that like we're in an era where there are so many good managers, and to have appointed Mourinho just seems like such a terrible move. Like I know he might not have been available at the time, but you look at what Tuchel is doing at Chelsea, and you're like, God, there is a template here to appointing a good manager. And I know Nagelsmann is reportedly the front runner for Spurs at this point. Pochettino probably would have been that guy.
Maybe Pochettino's spirit was broken. That whole I didn't come out of my room for however long it was after the Champions League.
And they were terrible under Pochettino after they lost the Champions League final.
They looked like maybe something had broken there as well. Mikey Johnson says Celtic and Rangers join the English Football League just as Scottish independence becomes a reality. I mean, there's a lot going on. There is actually a lot going on in all these stories that makes it really interesting. Like, what would happen if, like, was it Agnelli said, who accused Johnson of bringing it down for fear of undermining Brexit? I mean, I don't really think Boris Johnson had anything to do with this collapsing, by the way. I think it just was pretty badly organised. But everybody is scuttling now to try and claim some credit for slaying the European Super League when it appears as if, as you said, they may have actually stabbed themselves. Would it be better for the Union if Celtic and Rangers were to join the European Super League? Would that cleave Scotland to England in a more meaningful way? And so therefore, is this now the type of thing that a boffin, a spin doctor, is whispering in Boris Johnson's ear going, what if Celtic and Rangers were to join the Premier League? Then Scotland could never be independent. What do you think of that? Do you know? I mean, I don't know. Does it? Does it not? Does it have any impact?
Like, I mean, you should clearly be one of these boffins. I mean, a boffin will get paid good money to come up with that sort of idea. And
you must not use these gifts for evil. That's the...
You should cash in on that sort of idea. Like, you'd like to think it may not have much of an impact on real life, but then again, everybody in Glasgow probably identifies themselves with their football team as much as anything else, and that's going to be a large portion of who's going to be voting to stay or leave, or whether or not there is going to be a vote to stay or leave once again. So, like, it'd be interesting to see. I think, kind of like with the Super League, the European Super League, you would like to see what happens without consequence. Everybody wants to see what happens if there's no sort of trickle-down badness that occurs to the smaller man and all of this. But that probably just won't be the case, because Scottish football would be screwed if that happened.
Well, just listening to Tom earlier when he was talking about Stenhousemuir and the impact that they're having on local communities, it sounds like it's GAA, and it sounds like Scotland could really very easily charge the Premier League. Scottish football could charge the Premier League a fixed amount of money every year that they reinvest in indoor facilities and coaching in the style of Iceland, and become a league that is broken away from Celtic and Rangers, right? Independent of them, community-based, has an agreed salary structure. Like, there's loads of things you could do without Celtic and Rangers to fix Scottish football. Like, all of this is about a positive imagination. What would football look like if this existed over here and we had to mind ourselves? You know, it's a very complicated jigsaw that has been built at the moment, and you start taking pieces away, it feels like the picture disappears. But actually, maybe you can just build another picture if somebody had a bit of vision for it. And I think that's why the League of Ireland, this is a big opportunity for them. We'll get to that after 9. Stephen Byrne says, according to Sky, it's more or less certain David Alaba will sign a 5-year deal as a free agent worth a possible 400 grand a week. I thought they were broke as F, and then you wonder why with Florentino Perez. So Alaba's gone to Real Madrid. Is that the latest rumour? Luke Nixon says, you need to get Sky on board for the British media, which probably means giving them TV rights for a new Super League. So essentially saying that if you were to allow one of the big broadcasters who is currently in charge of some of the football the opportunity to say, we think this is a really good idea. Well, we do have some rights for it, yes. Then you might have a chance of getting it passed. Richie was right last night. This fumble was part of the strategy. The Reformed Champions League was the goal, and all the rest is just a distraction. I don't know. I'm not fully. I don't think that. I think that it's been so badly handled, and so many people are so embarrassed by it that the fumble was too catastrophic for some people's reputations that it can't have been planned. You can't have planned it to look this amateurish, because it reflects poorly on them. Will says UK fans can't have it both ways. They can't decry the Super League, foreign owners, etc., and in the same breath cheer when their club spend 150 million on a player or give them 400 grand a week in wages. That's the thing. That's the thing, Will. Those fans are having it both ways. That's exactly what's happening at the moment. And so, as Tom English said, when the next big player gets signed, are they going to be like, no, I can't get on board with this because my team has got better because the billionaire has sold rights to these games that we're going to and creating the atmosphere for abroad, and is selling those shirts and has got the new tractors from Ukraine sponsor on the advertising hoarding, and so therefore the rights have gone up in value in Ukraine. It's like, are they going to stop cheering? Will they not sing whatever it is that they sing? Inter, Juve, etc. can't go bankrupt as their billionaire owners can pay off their debts. They're badly run businesses. Similarly, Barca will just renegotiate their debts. The Inter situation is really interesting because they're owned by a Chinese conglomerate who are actually downsizing at the moment. So I'm not sure that they're going to decide to just pay off those debts when at the moment their own businesses in China are being rationalised and going through a process. So sure, somebody can pay off the debts, but eventually rich people didn't get rich by paying off other people's debts. That's not how it worked. They can renegotiate those debts and they can roll them up into bonds and try and make the companies profitable again, but they can't do that if they're getting into the European, if they're getting into the Champions League every year and getting absolutely annihilated by Paris Saint-Germain and by Manchester City. Because let's face it, the speed at which Paris Saint-Germain and Manchester City have got to the point where they are the respective best teams in their leagues and have become dominant in their leagues has been really quick. In historic terms, it took about a decade for those two teams to become superpowers, and they're now, at the start of every year, the absolute favourites. 1 year in 5, 1 year in 6, maybe they're not going to win the league. But let's wait and see how long that lasts. And the only other team who might be able to compete with them over the next couple of years, it looks like on a sustained basis, might actually be Chelsea, who have decided to similarly just put the money in. So I don't know. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens. Right, here's what's on OTB Sports Radio over the next while. Live at 1 o'clock today, it is the Women's Six Nations show. At 3 o'clock, it is our History of Sport lecture series with Paul Rouse. The retro panel, Ireland versus England in 1995, with Philip Quinn, Bernard O'Byrne and Henry Winter. That's a brilliant, brilliant conversation where everybody just shares their memories from the night. Bernard O'Byrne was head of security for the FAI, I think, on the night. Wexford 56, OTB Gold tonight at 6. It's Art Foley and Ned Wheeler. And then tonight from 7 o'clock, John Giles, Noelle Healy and much more with Nathan. So Noelle Healy giving her retirement interview after having won 4 All-Ireland titles, I believe, Eoin. Is that correct?
5 All-Ireland titles.
All right, okay. OTB AM, live in association with Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette, giving you the confidence to tackle the day. What age is Ryan Mason?
29, I think.
29.
Yeah. Just
turning 30 in July, I think, is he?
Yeah, I think so.
Excellent stuff. Right, time for us to tell you what you should be watching on the TV for the week ahead.
OTB AM.
Right, time for us to get into what to watch. Sue is with us again. Sue, good morning to you. How are you?
Morning, how are you?
Yeah, good. There's a lot of stuff here that I haven't heard of or seen. So is it all Oscar themed? Is that the plan this week?
Yeah, except for Mayor of Eastham. We're so lucky this year that we have access to all of the Oscar, well, a lot of the Oscar stuff before the Oscars. Like usually it's a struggle to see some of these. They might not even have been released in Ireland, but they're just generally available, which is an absolute luxury. Yeah, so mainly Oscar grim stuff, but also TV grim stuff. Mayor of Easttown is the one that was like my main pick for this week. I'm not sure if you've seen this yet. It was out in Sky Atlantic on Sunday night. It's Kate Winslet, 7 episodes, and everyone is raving about this. I found it really, really, really grim. Like the first episode is an introduction to her. Basically, it's a scene setter. It's just an introduction to her character and getting to know her. She's a detective. Her marriage has failed. She doesn't have the best relationship with her kids and her mother. She just seems a bit lost, depressed. Like, I don't think I remember her cracking a smile in the entire episode. Like, it is grim. And what I found about it as well, I think there's a lot of these shows at the moment that are like, the detective that's hard done by, that's gone back to a case and it's an unsolved mystery and we've seen it. Like, that's the issue, but she is very good. So not to give too much away, but there is an unsolved murder in the first episode, and then there's another murder by the end of the first episode that's very similar. So she's gone to investigate that under pressure from the town and from her boss. It's a good scene setter. I haven't got into it, but I'm like the reviews for this. I don't know if you noticed on Rotten Tomatoes, whenever something like this comes out, it usually starts like middle of the road and then it goes up or down depending on how many episodes people have watched. But this has just been like everywhere reviewed really, really well. So I'm looking forward to the rest of it.
So Mayor of Easttown, is that what it's called?
That's what it is. And her name is Mare, Mare. I don't know if it's short for something, but she's Mare, yeah.
And Kate Winslet.
Yes.
Right. Many seven episodes. I'm just repeating everything you said there. It's like and who's she again? What's that character? Can you turn it up a little bit? Would that be possible? Is it good? You're saying it's misery. Like I mean, misery good, misery bad, misery actually
misery good.
Okay.
Misery good. I just think the problem I have at the moment is everything I'm watching is misery, because once you get to Oscar season, there's nothing that's like lighthearted. Everything is misery. So once you go from I went from Promising Young Woman, Sound of Metal to this, I was like, oh my God, there's just no hope for anything. So yeah.
Okay, 7 parts on Sky Atlantic, and so you need Sky to get it, or Now TV, obviously.
Now, yeah.
I know it's not called Now TV anymore, but it's going to take us a little while. As I said, new stuff confuses us. What other Oscar stuff is knocking around at the moment?
So Promising Young Woman is gone on to Now. Now this was kind of released about 2 or 3 months ago, so it would have been available if you were paying for it on platforms, but the fact that it's on Now, I think it's going to a lot more people have access to it. This is my favourite film from this year. I think it is brilliant. It is such a good thriller. You're introduced to Carrie Mulligan, and you learn that she's a former med student, very talented, but something traumatic has happened in her past. You're not quite sure what happened. You kind of get a bit of an idea that there's something to do with her sister or friend. There's something going on in the background. And every week she goes to a club, she pretends she's really drunk, and then a guy comes up, brings her home, and when it starts to go wrong, she goes, oh, and then completely pulls the drunk thing away and is like, I was completely sober. What do you think you're doing? And it is, every time she does it, you're like, oh. And like, these guys are like, I'm a good guy. I wasn't going to do anything. And she's like, oh, right, well, do you want to sleep with me now? And he's like, no. So it's a real commentary on a lot of the stuff that's been going around for the last couple of years. It's very in your face. There's some of it that I think a lot of people will find very questionable in what she does. But she's really trying to kind of just, I don't know, kind of bring everything to the front for her, just to basically deal with everything that's happening in her life. And this is the way she's dealing with it. But she is a promising woman. You know that she's had a massive trauma and that she has so much potential. So it's very sad in places. Carrie Mulligan is excellent, excellent, because she has to dress up as a different character every time she goes into a pub to pick up a guy. And it's hard going, really hard going, but the end is spectacular. It's just it's the best thing I've seen this year, definitely.
Yeah. It's like, and there is a moment midway through where you're like, this thing's meandering and this is quite average actually. Like, while the plot points that you point out there kind of are front loaded, and then it's kind of like, oh, we've got this happy ending. This basically just turns into a rom-com and you're like, meh. And then all of a sudden the whole thing just turns on its head about midway through, and it's phenomenal once it makes that gear shift. Like, I'm not sure, is this going down as a strong year at the Oscars? Like, I kind of midway through, I've got an awful habit of like making judgments about things halfway through it rather than afterwards. And halfway through it, I was like, if this is getting nominated for an Oscar, it's a poor year. Then again, it completely changed my mind come the ending, and it was really, really good. But at the same time, like, if this is this him with a shout of winning the big awards? And if so, is it up there with some of the previous winners?
I don't think so. I think that the big one would be Trial of Chicago 7, actually. And it kind of came from the outside, because like Sound of Metal, there are some really good films in there, actually, because I was thinking the same thing. When you don't have the same amount of productions that are coming out of Hollywood, and you don't have the same access to production staff, how are you going to be able to produce these massive films that are going to do really well at the Oscars? And they've actually found a way to do it, and they've found, like, really good performances, really good scripts, really good directors, and I think that's what you're seeing in all of the Oscar nominations. But for me, I think Trial of Chicago, like, if Sacha Baron Cohen doesn't pick up Best Supporting Actor for Trial of Chicago 7, something is seriously wrong with the world. He was excellent in it. And I think it'll pick up things like script, like all of that kind of thing. I think it was 7 nominations it has altogether, but I think it'll pick up the big ones, you know. So just do a quick, we haven't spoken about Trial of Chicago 7 on this before, so what's the crack with that? This is brilliant. It's based on a true story. It's anti-Vietnam War protesters who they were charged with conspiracy and crossing state lines. They just wanted to charge them on anything, basically. It's a courtroom drama. And these 7 guys were charged with this when there really wasn't. It was baseless. There was nothing to charge them with. And most of it is in the courtroom. And it's brilliant because of the Aaron Sorkin script. The performances are excellent. And do you know that feeling when you watch a film like In the Name of the Father and something like that, where you get to think, like, this is injustice? And that's the way you feel at the end of this. You're like, I can't believe this happened. How did they get away with charging these guys when they had nothing on them? And their lives afterwards, like, I don't know if either of you guys have seen this, but the credits at the end, what happens to these guys afterwards? You're like, hang on a second, what? Like, it's really a really good, like, if you have a couple of hours to spare and you're big into, like, Aaron Sorkin is so heavy on dialogue and script. If you're into that kind of thing, you will just love this. You will lap it up. But I'm really hoping it does well at the Oscars for him. It's
6-1 for Best Picture, whereas Nomadland is pushed into 6-1 on. It's actually when it looks like a Trial of the Chicago 7 will be shooting from the outside to actually make it.
I've seen Nomadland. I'll talk about it next week, but it's not as good. It really isn't.
You don't think it's as good as the Trial of the Chicago 7?
No.
Oh, right, okay.
I'm very much out of my own that, but I mean, Frances McDormand is brilliant in it, but I feel like nothing happens for the entire film, and it's so depressing.
That's
beautifully shot.
That's very of the moment, isn't it? Nothing happens. Everything looks normal and looks good. Nothing actually happening. We're all stuck in this perpetual now.
Yeah, and that's exactly what it is. And it's just her in her RV doing the same thing year in, year out, and just living her life on the road with all of these people around her going, why are you doing this? Why don't you just live in a house like everyone else? And she just can't do it. I found it really hard going and a bit depressing. Whereas I felt like the Trial of Chicago 7, you were fired up at the end of it. Whereas Nomadland, you were just like, oh my God, I don't know. I could never watch that again.
Sound of Metal. What is Sound of Metal?
This is so good. This went on to Amazon Prime on the April 12th. And Amazon Prime have actually got some really good stuff at the moment. Riz Ahmed plays a heavy metal drummer. And in the first few minutes of the film, you can just hear this, like he's drumming and you can hear everything just around him just starts to ring, the tinnitus in his ear. And that's what's really, it's really hard to watch in some parts because his scenes, you can hear his hearing getting worse and worse and worse, and he can't hear and he's trying to listen. And that's what makes it very difficult. They put you in his position for the entire film. His relationship starts to fall apart with his girlfriend. He has an addiction problem, so he ends up going to this deaf community who teach him how to sign. And it's so uplifting in some parts and so depressing in others, but he is absolutely excellent. And there's a guy called Paul Raci, and actually when I was watching the film, I was like, this guy has to be nominated for an Oscar. And I looked up the Oscar list and he is on it. And he's only ever done parts like Parks and Rec and been in a couple of episodes, things here and there. And he plays his mentor in it. And in real life, his parents are deaf. So he knew how to sign, which was one of the main reasons why he was cast. And there's one scene in it where Riz Ahmed's character decides that he's going to go and get this surgery so he'll be able to hear. And Paul Raci is like, but in this community, we don't believe that not being able to hear is a disability. Like we believe that it's good for us and it teaches us a lot about ourselves. And he gets so upset in the scene about him trying to go and find his hearing, get his hearing sorted. It is such a brilliant performance. And I know the best supporting actor is Sacha Baron Cohen, but he's so good in it. It's actually quite uplifting for something that's very depressing.
All right, so that's on Amazon at the moment?
Yeah.
Okay, that's on Amazon. Nomadland is going to be out on the 30th. Where?
Yes, Disney.
Something on Disney, okay.
Disney, yeah.
And Pretty Promising Young Woman, we said, is on now, and Mayor of Easttown is on Sky Atlantic, so on now as well. The other thing that we haven't spoken, Trial of Chicago 7, where can people see that?
That's on Netflix.
Okay, grand. And the last one is Pieces of a Woman.
Yeah, I found this very, very difficult to watch. And it's only really out of the big movies that are nominated for Oscars, she's up for Best Actress. It's Vanessa Kirby, who played Margaret in The Crown. And she plays a woman that decides to have a home birth. And during the home birth, the midwife says something is desperately wrong here and we need to get you to a hospital. And she insists that she's going to stay at home. And unfortunately, the baby doesn't survive. And the fallout from it, in terms of her relationship, Shia LaBeouf plays her boyfriend brilliantly in this, really, really good. The fallout of their relationship and her relationship with her family and the grief that she goes through is just, now I know Vanessa Kirby did a lot of research for this role, spoke to a lot of people who had lost children because she's never been pregnant. She was like, I had to go and find out what that was like, what that experience was like. It is hard to watch in parts, but she is excellent, really, really good in it. there is just, like, out of those films that are around at the moment, I know we were saying the Oscars isn't that great. I actually think there's some really, really good stuff this year. And there's a lot of stuff that's focusing on women. Like the fact that 2 of the Oscar listed, like, woman is in the title. And I just think this is something that's probably not on screen a lot when it comes to, like, loss of children, loss of babies. It's excellent. Really, really good.
Okay. You're still watching and raving about Line of Duty. It's been wall to wall everywhere for the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, I'm obsessed. Like, I don't know if you guys are listening to this Line of Duty podcast that the other guys are doing, Brendan and the guys upstairs, Rebecca and Hannah. It is excellent. If you're not listening to that, it's so, so good. But they break down all of the theories and everything every week. And I mean, I'm talking about people zooming in on Post-its, and like, we're at that level. It is just... like, it is a maze. Everyone's lost. People are mentioning character names. Nobody knows what's going on anymore, and you don't know where it's going to tie up. And they're leaving you in a cliffhanger at the end of every episode. It's just really good TV. Like, 15 million people tuned into the first episode. Like, it's huge. It's just brilliant TV. It should be a case now where, like, European Super League has forced us all to rethink what matters in football. Line of Duty should force us to rethink what matters in television, which is episode after episode, week after week, rather than binge watching. Like, this is good traditional television values coming through in Line of Duty. Yeah, and I love that. I love that it's like a community of people that immediately hop onto Twitter afterwards. They're like, what is going on? And there's like theories going around everywhere. I haven't seen that since Love Hate, really. And it's great appointment TV, but they're saying that broadcast TV is alive and well because of this. Like, you're looking at all the other stuff that's in streaming channels, but broadcast TV is really where you're going to get a huge collection of people watching it all at the same time. It's so good. Is it BBC, ITV? BBC, okay. Yeah, BBC One on Sundays. And go back and watch. It's on the RT player at the moment, 1 to 5. I've actually gone back to season 1 and I've started watching that along with season 6 because I'm so lost with some of the characters. But it's well worth the rewatch. It's so good. What are you watching at the moment, Owen? I am rewatching The Wire at the moment. Still, and, how's it going? Not very well, to be quite honest with you. There was the old... I just find whenever Champions League was in full overdrive, my watching of things just nosedives. That's certainly happened. Tried to get into a bit of Ted Lasso recently as well. I'm starting to warm to him a little bit. At the start, I was like, not for me. This isn't great. But I know it's been renewed for a second season this week, and it's coming out this summer, I think, Sue, isn't it? So I went back and watched a bit of it last night, actually, and I'm warming to him. I think it takes a few episodes to kind of warm up to what the television show is trying to be, because it's not trying to be a laugh-out-loud funny comedy, even though it is kind of funny. Which is a great endorsement for a comedy, isn't it? It's kind of funny. Go watch it. Right. Sue, that is this week's What to Watch. Good stuff. Thanks a million. No worries.
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station.
The Women's Six Nations is here, and OTB Sports is your one-stop shop for all the best coverage, analysis and opinion.
As Ireland take on Wales and France to decide their position on finals day, we will bring you a special weekly Six Nations show with some of the great names of the game, as well as special interviews with Irish legends Sophie Spence and Rosie Foley.
With reporters at the games, all the latest team news, match previews and much, much more. Check out otbsports.com/Women's Six Nations.
Check out the Boyle Sports app today for details on which football match is getting the no-lose treatment this week. Plus, browse through dozens of new player markets, all powered by Opta. Shots on target, left foot, right foot, headed goals, assists and more. See the Boyle Sports app for full T's and C's. Boyle Sports. This is betting. Gamble responsibly. See gamblingcare.ie 18+.
Sean, what's that thing going round the garden?
That is our new Husqvarna Auto Mower.
Auto mower?
Yeah, it's a robotic lawnmower from Husqvarna. Cuts the grass automatically, has GPS tracking and an app. Even works in the rain. I just thought, why spend time cutting grass when I could spend it with the family?
Great! You can put the dinner on, so...
no can do, love. Have to paint the man cave.
Husqvarna Auto Mower. Never mow again. Learn more at husqvarna.ie.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.
You never know what you're going to get when you stray into the YouTube comments. In the ad break there, I just had a quick look, and there's a little bit of genius coming through from Jay Warren, who says, I've got a great idea for a horror comedy. It's Danny Healy-Rae, and he's a cult leader in rural Ireland, and he's fighting against the local guard, who's played by David Wilmot. I would watch the hell out of that. I would absolutely. It might be a little bit close to reality is the problem, and people would say, no, this is, it's too real. Right, it's 8 minutes past 9. If you want to leave a comment on the YouTube stream, you're more than welcome to. The best place to watch us these days, of course, is on the OTB Sports app, and you can listen to us there as a radio show as well. Just tell Alexa or Google Home to play OTB Sports Radio, and it should work. If it doesn't, let us know, and we'll talk you through it. Right, it's 9 minutes past 9, and we're trying to reflect on the madness of the week that we've seen, and I'm delighted to say we have Stephen Doyle and Joe Molloy with us to give us their impressions of exactly what has gone on here and what we should all be making of it. Stephen, I might start with you in terms of what it means for Irish fans in the League of Ireland, because that's kind of been a little a baseline, maybe a little bit, or a minor refrain in all this. What does it genuinely mean for fans of, or what does it mean in terms of an opportunity for the League of Ireland?
Yeah, it was funny because on Tuesday night I was working at the Bohemians match against Sligo Rovers, and a little bit like Sunday when we were doing the off-the-ball match, Arsenal Fulham kind of go in, start doing the game, and an hour and a half, 2 hours later you come back out and all of a sudden the football world has gone into meltdown and you've missed everything. It was quite surreal. But look, I don't think it's going to have a massive, huge impact straight away. I think this thing might be gradual over the next, say, decade. And I don't think it's just, I don't want to, could it be just kind of harping on about League of Ireland as well. I think we'll see this kind of benefit the lower leagues in England as well, even like the Championship, League One, League Two, where even before the pandemic hit, we were starting to see much healthier crowds at the grounds at League of Ireland matches, and also in the lower leagues in the UK as well. They were looking quite healthy. Like, you even look at Bohemians, they got over 1,000 memberships for the first time in the club's history while the ground was shut down, which is pretty incredible. Shamrock Rovers have been, attracting massive crowds to that brilliant stadium that they have out there in Tala. The last big one I can remember is that famous game, Dundalk against Shamrock Rovers, the 3-2 at the start of last season, which was an absolutely brilliant spectacle, and you had 6,500, 7,000 people there. So, and I think this has been happening around the League of Ireland, where the crowds have been getting a lot, or they've been increasing. And then you see developments like Finn Park getting the go-ahead. They're going to have a great facility up there, a great stadium. We're going to see Dalymount Park rebuilt, I should say. That's hopefully going to be open by 2025. So slowly but surely, we're going to start seeing much better facilities at the ground, which we all know was something that held the League of Ireland back. And that's something you see in the Championship in League One and League Two, where clubs like, say, Middlesbrough, Nottingham Forest, Bradford City down in League One, and then even the likes of Salford coming up now, where they've all got really good facilities. And I think that really helps in them attracting crowds. And perhaps these people are a little bit disillusioned with the Premier League club or the big club that they support that was playing in the Champions League. And maybe just, we're going to see, even from my own point of view, I've been going to matches at Dalymount Park with my cousin, his brother-in-law, and a couple of lads for the last few years. These are Scottish guys who are now living in Ireland for the last couple of years. And only in recent years, in the last, say, 1 or 2 years, they've decided to buy season tickets, memberships with the club. So, I think it is starting to turn. I don't think there's going to be a big turn away from Premier League clubs and big clubs around Europe. Like, as I think Simon Cooper was making the point with you last night, Joe, on Off the Ball, he was saying that, you go to London stadiums like the likes of Chelsea and Arsenal, I go and commentate on matches there myself, and they're sold out. But is it all local fans? I don't think so. It's all the day trippers. It's the tourists from around the world, and there's no harm in that. If that's the way the clubs want to make money, that's fine. But again, and one thing I would say, my message would be to League of Ireland fans, and maybe you want to encourage people who are disillusioned with the clubs over the war, is to not maybe look down your nose on them. Try and encourage them to go. Lads who are maybe going over to see the likes of Everton or Manchester United, Chelsea, 6-7 times a year. Maybe say to them, we'll go 5 times a year. Take one of those trips that's cost you 200 or 300 quid. Spend it on a season ticket at a League of Ireland club. You're getting best of both worlds.
Yeah, it's a good point. Joe, this PR battle was an absolute disaster from the standpoint of the European Super League. On the flip side of that, it was a PR masterstroke from those who desperately did not want this, namely someone like Gary Neville. To what extent do you think this is down to the influence of Sky Sports and to Gary Neville, because the fact that they come to him twice on Sunday, it explodes on Sunday evening. Monday Night Football is a massive event, and he speaks in such terms that the football fans can relate to, that all of a sudden they're up in arms. And I just wonder if the connection is there, that Gary Neville has had some sort of massive influence on the behaviour of the football fans in protest over the last couple of days.
Yeah, I think he had a huge effect. I really do. Like, the way he spoke about it was just so militant that there was no chance really you could invoke a bit of tribalism afterwards and start speaking as a Man United fan and saying, well, maybe this isn't so bad, or there's upsides to this. Like, so the incompetence of the launch obviously played into his hands. It gave him a 48-hour head start, didn't it? You know, he had Sunday and then all on Monday. I think Florentino Perez was doing a daft interview by Monday evening, but otherwise there was just radio silence after this, you know, terrible press release, heartless kind of press release at stupid o'clock Sunday night, and the silly logo, and Germans aren't involved and PSG aren't involved, and you know, so they were off to a terrible start, but they were so naive to think they wouldn't have to win hearts and minds, and that wouldn't have been that difficult, I don't think.
That's for me is the outstanding question here, is like, I don't think that what they're proposing is so radical and so different. The way it's being painted, that like this could easily come back in a couple of years' time when people have digested a little bit and gone, the new Champions League isn't due to start for a while anyway, so perhaps that's one window of opportunity to keep them at bay. But like, this definitely hasn't gone away, because if you just explained it properly, it's like, okay, yeah, I get it now. Yeah, okay, there'll be have some minor sop to relegation promotion. Those 5 positions are available for whoever wins whatever other competitions out there. Like, easy enough to fix all those problems.
Yeah. Like, I mean, could you dream of launching something like that with the press release at like 11 o'clock on a Sunday night and a average logo and nothing else? It's just amazing. Like, Simon Cooper made the point last night. Why didn't they talk to Gary Neville in advance? And again, like, we underestimate tribalism. If they had got Jurgen Klopp on board and Klopp had come on television on Monday Night Football and said, you know what, guys, I've looked at it. This will lead to great things for Liverpool. There's a lot of money which is going to flow down. 400 million a year is going to flow down to the pyramid. There'll still be 5-6 places. Maybe we can expand that. I mean, geez, the suggestion, or the whole idea was just so grotesque. It was probably going to be difficult to get over the line. But if they had sat around the table, those 12, and said, let's soften this a little bit, you know, 20 places, let's give 10 at minimum to other countries, and relegation and promotion, a few other things, and more money, whatever.
Yeah.
You know, they went all out, you would have to say. But if they had got something a bit more palatable, got Klopp on board, like, what did Gary Neville say the other night? There's 150 million United fans. I mean, just get them on board. You're kind of up and running. I can't think of another public issue in the last how long where it was 98% against. Like, there's no, you know what I mean? Everything's polarized. I just couldn't believe that it was just across the board against. They couldn't even bring their own fans with them. So it was just so botched, the whole thing. Like, how could it work without PSG and the Germans for a start? You know what I mean? Like, they just weren't ready to go.
It can't. And that, like, I can't wait till the leaks start coming out about why they decided to go right now. What was it because UEFA were about to announce their thing? Like, what was the spur?
I'd have an inkling there, Jerry. You mean as why the thing started to collapse, or why it started to fade?
Why they decided to make it public before it was actually ready to be made public?
Yeah, I would imagine there's an element of the UEFA thing. I think one of the interesting little side notes on this that went under the radar as well was that Florentino Perez actually brought forward the presidential election at Real Madrid, so that he had his 4 years signed, sealed and delivered before this thing all kicked off. So I thought that was an interesting bit of timing there from Perez, who seems to engineer a lot of things in his favour. I just feel as well that the pandemic definitely has kind of made a lot of the clubs who are carrying debt want to move this quickly. They wanted to try and get it all in place for this summer to start this August, so they could start making money and start paying off some of that debt, or refinancing so they can bring in some of the big signings like Erling Haaland, that kind of thing. So
I do agree with that, Stephen, absolutely. But give yourselves 2 extra weeks where the PR company you've just hired has 2 weeks to give you a bit of advice. Let's bring Gary Neville through the plans. Let's get another graphic designer on the logos. Let's talk to Klopp. Let's talk to Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. Let's bring these people in and say, look, number one, if you're the manager of this team, it's going to be great for you because we're going to have more access. You're not going to have to worry about qualification for the Champions League every year. You're going to worry straight about, can you win the league title? If you can't, you put all your eggs in the European basket. Let's go. Let's do this. But instead, it was like a science project.
And they could have done it in so many ways. They could have come out and said, you know what? These UEFA reforms, which, by the way, we drove on, but we're disowning them now. These UEFA reforms, this 36-team bloated mess is not fair on the fans.
Or the players.
We want to make the Champions League exciting again.
Yeah.
It would have been a barefaced lie, but at least come up with something. I just, Simon Cooper said, it's incompetence, and pointed to the fact that there's a lot of not self-made men here.
Yeah.
You've got the Glazer heirs, you've got Sheikh Mansour, you've got...
Kroenke married his money.
And
people at the top aren't very clever, I think Simon said, wasn't it?
And I think there's something in that. I mean, he said, in fairness, John Henry's a smart cookie, so and he does appear to be, obviously. But so there's a lot of egos and a lot of lads that just kind of were given all this and probably have deluded themselves into thinking it's down to their great intelligence. But
yeah, but they aren't clever. I was kind of going through the figures there last night. We're talking about entrusting this multi-billion venture in the hands of men who can't even run their own clubs. Barcelona, €488 million debt. Real Madrid, 354 million debt. Juve, €358 million debt. Milan, 104. Manchester United, £455 million debt. Spurs, £605 million debt. Arsenal, £108 million debt. They can't run their own clubs. How could they run this multi-billion venture, which they had to get a loan from JP Morgan? We didn't have any news or detail of whether a television company were going to come in here and try and broadcast this. So I just think this thing was there. It was never going to work.
I don't buy that at all, Stephen. I actually think that there's from a business perspective, it makes perfect business sense. I don't think the architects of it had enough emotional intelligence to realise that you need to bring the fans with you. But from a business perspective, you can see how the closed shop, revenue sharing, an agreed wage structure, maybe they would ban transfer fees between the teams. Maybe you wouldn't be able to buy players off each other. There's loads of ways that they could have cooked this.
Yeah, but Jared, that's an American model.
Yeah,
it's
but
an American model. It's not. You can't apply to football.
But you can. That's what they were trying to do. It turns out you can. You absolutely can. If everybody agrees to it, all you got to do is get to the point where. Say that again.
How many NFL teams are there?
It's 32
teams.
How
many NFL teams are there?
32.
Okay. How many soccer clubs are there in Europe?
But the point is, what they're trying to do is to stop that. They're trying to get to the point where there's.
You can't listen. They kept talking about this football pyramid.
The reason they can't do it here is because they didn't bring the fans with them. If they set up a European Super League where there's no promotion or relegation, all of a sudden that league makes money year after year after year, and you need to be pretty dumb as a club owner to lose money in that scenario.
You can't apply an American model to football in Europe. It's impossible. Absolutely impossible. The Glazers kept mentioning the word pyramid last night. There's a reason it's called a pyramid, because you've got all the blocks at the bottom, the foundations that keep the rest of the top, that feed up to the top clubs. That's, these players don't just, come out of nowhere. There are some of the players that come to the academies at these big clubs, but there's a lot of players who don't. Kevin De Bruyne being one of them. Do you know what I mean? So you need these clubs. It's like an ecosystem that, even though you might not want these little clubs in your big competitions, your league competitions, that's why you have the Europa League. That's why they're starting this conference league. You need these clubs. These all feed into the bigger clubs. You can't just cut them away, cut them loose, and then expect to have this stagnant collection of 20 teams. That are just like, what happens with the 5 teams that they were bringing in? What happens with them the following year? You just can't have. People are saying the Champions League is boring. How boring is it going to get watching the same 20 teams in 10 years' time? People give out about Rangers and Celtic playing each other 4 times a year.
You know,
is it going to get boring watching Paris Saint-Germain versus Bayern? I don't know if it is, Stephen. Like, that's the thing.
Oh, absolutely will.
Well, but I mean, there's no evidence that the football's actually getting to a point where those matches are better than they have been in the past. I absolutely agree that the pyramid has to exist. But again, from a PR perspective, all you do is say we're going to put more money into that than UEFA are doing. That's all you say. It's like, we're going to generate more money, we're going to give more money than UEFA are doing, and that's argued away.
Where does the money come from? Like, they had to get money off of a bank to start it off. There was no broadcast agreement in place.
But that's not like that.
And this
they would get a broadcast agreement. Like, that's easy, Stephen. You know, DAZN have just given Eddie Hearn hundreds of millions to stream boxing in Ireland and England. Like, there's endless amounts of money floating around.
I'm also not sure they mightn't be looking for their own broadcast agreement, Stephen. Like,
yeah, well,
this is a fight to break the model now, isn't it? This is we've come from an era where it's UEFA and FIFA and Sky and BT and all the broadcasters. So they own the game. They own the game at the moment. They make the money. UEFA generate about $3 billion a year. Sky hand over their money. BT hand over their money. They control everything. So the new owners have come along and said, why do you control the game? We're now going to break that model. That model, it worked. It was great. That model's over. We're going to take it. And look, they did it in the most grotesque way I know. But say, and Simon Cooper said last night, say they had even just come up with the current Champions League structure. You know, say they hadn't been as greedy, for instance, and within that Champions League structure, they'd take more money for themselves. But say they had come up with that same structure, it was somehow palatable to the fans. They speak to the very influential Gary Neville's of the world, and they say, look, Gary, and because this was their pitch as well, we're going to do what UEFA and everyone's doing, but we're going to do it better. We're going to make more money, you know? So this is going to lead to more money. It's going to flow down. You come with us. Jurgen, you come with, explain it to the fans. This is better. They break the model. UEFA, FIFA, Sky, good luck. Do they need a broadcaster? They set up their own, they can afford the cameras. They set up their own TV company. Yeah. We all hand over. What did Gary Neville say on Monday night? Yeah. There's 150 million United fans. Get them all to pay £1, you know, per game. So, like, they're not thinking about broadcasters and the way it was and pyramids. The pyramid thing is a tax they have to pay to keep everyone happy. And I guess maybe they don't mind that there's clubs for Kevin De Bruyne to come through and everything. But ultimately, as Ger said, they hate the fact that, well, there's different owners. The Americans don't understand this concept whereby 25% of their revenue is uncertain until they make the top four. There is the desperation of Madrid and Barcelona and the Italian clubs to keep up with the oil states. I mean, Barcelona are close to $1 billion in debt now. That's not just pandemic. 70% of their revenue goes just on wages alone, so it's not being run well. So they all have different priorities, but everyone's priority converges on, let's make more money, let's be in complete control of this thing, and we're laughing.
Well, it depends what you want to get out of football, doesn't it? Because...
Well, it's what they want to get out of football. What we want to get out of football is watching good matches and a sense of community and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, we're talking about their perspective here. We're not saying it's right. We're not saying it's good for the game. We're not saying any of that. But that's what's going on.
I'd be looking at addressing. So, like, one of their issues was there's people from the age of 16 to 24 aren't interested in football anymore. Well, maybe that's because you're pricing them out of the stadiums.
Sure.
You know, if you want to go see El Clasico, €120, the cheapest ticket. How is any 16 to 24-year-old going to afford that? Manchester United are charging over £100 for tickets. You know, maybe they need to start looking.
Don't kids fall in love with the big games on TV though? Isn't that like my first experience?
Not Manchester United fans, do they? Like, do fans from Manchester fall in love with Manchester United, watch them on the TV? No, they go to the games.
Well, a small amount of them do. When you consider that the 150 million fans figure that Gary Neville threw out, you know, what percentage of those have been to matches? Have 1 million Manchester United fans been to matches over the last 20 years, maybe, from around the world? So it's...
And that's the problem, because football it's an outdoor game. It's played on a football pitch in a stadium with supporters, you know. And I do think that there is that. I think Daniel Lambert spoke about it on OTB AM yesterday. It's just that Irish supporters, especially, have lost that unique feeling of going to a live football match. Like, I go to matches around Europe. I've been to, in the last couple of years, been to Real Betis down in Spain. I've been to Athletic Bilbao, AEK Athens in Greece, matches in Holland. Like, it's the most incredible experience going to a match. And I'd recommend anybody go with the away supporters to these games. It's the most incredible experience. There's nothing like it.
And Stephen, don't you think that the current owners, and again, their priority is money, but don't you think they're banking on the fact that of the global fan base, the percentage of matchgoers is tiny?
Absolutely. But this is the thing. These people,
they're probably right in that respect as well, though, aren't they?
Like money's the most important thing to these guys. But you know, if you're in football for profit, you know, you're not a very good businessman, are you?
The money is an important factor for all the fans, though, is the thing, and that's going to be really interesting to see how long this sense of community actually stands up for, because the sense of community is nonsense, really, isn't it, when it comes to being a supporter of a top Premier League club, to being the majority of those supporters, especially if you're not from that city or if you don't live in that community, for example. What you want is your owners to be rich and pay big money to ensure that your team continues to contend. So this idea was...
Well, is that an elephant in the room then, lads? Is it, you know, player salaries? You know, maybe this is where they need to start looking is at player salaries, because some of them are just ridiculous now. You know, David De Gea is sitting on a bench getting £300,000 a week.
Yeah, so what would be the next outcome of that then, if they do start to address that, particularly in England, where there is talk of some sort of legislation? We'll have to wait and see if that actually manifests itself in reality. But if that's a reality where there is a significant salary cap put on Premier League clubs, all British clubs, for example, the players are just going to go elsewhere. That will damage the Premier League brand. I know the Chinese Super League is a complete bust at this point, but there might be an alternative to that. It might well be somewhere else in Europe. Players will find somewhere else to play their trade. The money is what makes the Premier League good. Let's not make any bones about it.
They're also not in debt the way we're discussing, really. I mean, I know you're saying United are in debt, but they're not really. You know, it's a leveraged buyout. Glazers have taken $1 billion from the club. They still turn a profit every year, even with David De Gea sitting on the bench, and the Glazers still take a healthy dividend. So, you know, from a losing money point of view, the Glazers haven't lost a thing. They bought an asset for 700 odd million from memory with the fans' money, and then it's now worth 3 billion, and they've taken money out of it every year. So there's no losing money there. Stan Kroenke has not put a cent of his own money into the club. It's worth 2 billion. He hasn't put a cent of his own money in. And, you know, it's kind of, he's an interesting case, isn't he? Like, he just runs it down the middle. And that way he doesn't have to spend crazy money on players all the time, putting his own money, chasing silly nonsense like winning a Premier League. There's no danger of relegation. They just keep kind of trundling on. Liverpool turn a profit. So, like, they probably are, you know, they're still making money as well, Stephen, a lot of them.
Yeah, but Liverpool turn a profit, and John Henry was notable in the, you know, the reason he got involved with this because he couldn't believe that UEFA were so soft when it came to financial fair play. Like, he knows that the financial fair play thing was an absolute joke. And this is why he threw his lot in with the Super League, is because he knew that they would never be able to match the spending of Paris Saint-Germain and Manchester City.
Yeah, that's
true. Know?
That's true. It was interesting that in this breakaway league, one of the few positive things you would say is that they had strict salary caps.
And I think that ultimately, the stratification of European football has that top tier where it is the nation states and the petrol money that they can put in. And Chelsea are kind of, in the Venn diagram, they're certainly more up there if they wanted to be. Abramovich said he wanted to start running the company properly, and then last season that seemed to change and they ploughed loads of money back into it. So you would expect that they will continue to do that. But the rest of them, like, how in future will John W. Henry and Stan Kroenke and Real Madrid and all of those other clubs like Barcelona actually finance the arms race that's coming? Especially when financial fair play seems to be completely irrelevant. And there's loads of different ways around it. As we've seen, the rules get flouted. You get kicked out of the Champions League, but you don't really. You actually don't get kicked out of the Champions League. You might have one transfer window where you're not allowed to buy players, but that's okay because you've invested so much money in your academy, and I'm not even sure that counts against your financial fair play. So I don't know. I don't think this has gone away at all. I think that there's it seems like this battle has been lost. But what they'll do is they'll learn. The next people will come along and go, okay, I see what you did there. Let's fix it next time.
And like that battle.
Will they learn though? Will they learn? Because, you know, John Henry's done a number of things to annoy Liverpool fans, and every time he comes out and he says, sorry, I've listened to you and I'll take these points on board, and we'll try and make, you know, it's happened last year with the furlough thing. It happened with the whole incident with the buying up of property around Anfield, and then
but they won the league.
The area.
They won the league, and the Liverpool fans thought he was great. Like, you know, Tony Evans has a great piece on the. There's a couple of great pieces on the Independent website where you can track his relationship with John W. Henry, where they were like, he got summoned to a lunch meeting with him, and John W. Henry said, there was a list of people I should never speak to, and you were on it. And then they end up on the tube together, and they had this weird kind of correspondence where he's actually writing notes for John W. Henry's address on the day of Hillsborough. And then he wins the league, and Tony Evans writes this piece about, like, look, this guy, you know, I've had my ups and downs with him, but you've got to give him the credit. And the Liverpool fans at that stage thought he was an absolute legend. Since then, there's this misstep. But if they buy Mbappe, if something like that happens, do the Liverpool fans go, John W. Henry, you've got to sell this club because you just bought us the best player in the world. Get out of here.
Your FSG out was trending in January. Like, we can't overlook, it wasn't all rosy until this week. It was trending because they didn't sign a centre-back. That is what football is going to turn back into immediately, and that is the status quo. People think that some sort of change has been won this week, as if they're like Arab Spring was the phrase used by Tom English earlier on, as if this sort of protest has led to some massive society shift. Only one thing has been won this week, and that is the status quo, so that things can stay the same, so that Gary Neville can have the same job because Sky Sports have the same level of influence, and that British football still is as influential all around the world in the Premier League sense of things.
A worse version of the status quo because the new Champions League is coming in. Steve, I think you're right. That I hope that you're right, that there will be some kind of recalibration of people's local relationship with football.
The other thing as well, I just think I do think there was long-term damage done this week. I agree with you, Eoin, actually. I don't think this kind of went frayed at the edges just because of supporters and Gary Neville rousing supporters and that kind of thing. Like and I spoke to you, Jared, during the week, my kind of gut feeling was that Chelsea and Manchester City are in the Champions League semi-finals. Roman Abramovich is obsessed with winning the European Cup. He wants a second one. Manchester City have never won the European Cup. They are obsessed with winning it. And I think they were the clubs that got the cold feet because they don't need to be in this Super League. As you were mentioning earlier, Ger, like they've got endless pots of money at both those clubs. They don't need to jump into the Super League, but they do want the credit with their supporters of winning the European Cup this season. They're in the semi-finals. They didn't want to jeopardise that. And I think they were the clubs that got the cold feet, and that's where the whole thing started to crumble.
I love the Champions League. I love this Champions League, the way it's been over the last decade. I think it's been some of the best things that has ever happened in world sport. It's the best players playing in knockout matches, under lights, midweek. Sometimes it rains. It's absolutely sensational. It's like, it's as good as anything in the world. And they're like, no, we want more. That's the problem.
Yeah, that is the problem. And on Owen's point, I think Owen's absolutely spot on. John Barnes was brilliant yesterday. He did a couple of the breakfast shows on UK television, and I listened to a lot of TalkSport this week, and it's taken its toll. But the fans are all phoning in saying, we've won. And I think a lot of the presenters are saying, the fans, you have won, you have done this. It's a victory for the fans. Everything is rosy again. Like, it's a real, football has won celebration. And John Barnes came on and said, look, this is just a fight between the new owners, as we've said, and UEFA, FIFA, Sky, BT, to see who can exploit the masses for the next generation. Either way, the masses are being exploited. So with this victory, he said, our ticket prices coming down, his subscription TV going to go down. The winner here, as Owen said, has been the status quo, and that's already treating fans pretty poorly. It's leveraging their loyalty. Look at Newcastle. Look at, any number of clubs. And they've won this battle, and that's the status quo survives. But will they win the war? As you said, Jerry, I don't think so. I think these Super 12 come away, they regroup, they regather. Now, it's probably diminished their power in the short term, and there's a real sense of, like, best of luck trying to get this off the ground when this is fresh in the memory. But, I mean, what would you think? 5, 6, 7 years? A flashy presentation, the right people on board. It will start with, we've listened to the fans. Yeah. And we agree that this Champions League has become too bloated, and we want to give you the best football.
And we'll give you
away they go.
We'll give you a team in Qatar and Dubai. And all of a sudden,
well, listen, a team in Dublin and have Steve Doyle signed up in 5 minutes flat.
Listen, Joe, all I'm going to say is, 13th of April, St. Pat's, home to Longford. Brian Kerr has a spot on the Camac for you. He wants to see it out there. I want to see Joe and Brian.
I'd love to. I do think you're right, though. I think there is a chance for, not because of this, by the way, not because, suddenly the scales have fallen from our eyes and we realise that actually the Glazers don't care about me, the fan. Like, I don't think that's, if that's happened, it's been an odd 16 years for you. But I do think, just speaking anecdotally, Steve, amongst my friends or whatever, maybe it's age, but I do think that the Premier League, from when we really fell in love with football in the 90s, that was kind of a sweet spot where the money was coming in and there was a bit of glamour and it was an attractive product, and but it was still so relatable, wasn't it? And you know, the Abramovich era kicks off this new era, and then the television money. I do think it's become so sanitized, so corporate, so kind of hollow. I find a lot of my friends have drifted away from it. Like, they take it or leave it. They watch the big games, but a lot of us not into it the way we were. And I think there is a kind of understanding now that, God, going to an actual football game, sense of community, relationship with a club that, you know, isn't out to screw you at every turn. There is something very attractive, I think, about that to enough people to really get a bit of momentum going now in the league, as you said, once facilities and different things come through.
I hope so. And I hope absolutely. We're out of time, but this has been great, lads. Thanks very much to the two of you for joining us early this morning. OTB AM is live in association with Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette, giving you the confidence to tackle the day ahead. Great debate, lads. Smashing debate, guys. Wow, that was entertaining. Often wondered how two journalists that have different opinions would really go at it. That's not actually speaking about us today. That's about yesterday's Harris versus Hunter debate on the WhatsApp from Alan Mahy. So you can get us that 0879 180 180. My thanks to Joe Molloy and to Stephen Doyle as well. Right now we're going to bring you Dave McIntyre and Dan McDonald from last night's football show. On tomorrow's show, Adrian and Eoin live from 7:30. The crappy quiz. Alan Quinlan reacting to the news that has broken officially now. La Rochelle have confirmed a 3-year deal for Ron O'Gara to take full control of all rugby operations. This follows the news that John O'Gibbs is joining Claremont as their new head coach. So we'll react to that across the day. Of course, it's big news for Irish rugby. It's big news for Ron O'Gara as well. The latest on the Super League and much more as well. Enjoy.
I was very happy to say Dave McIntyre is back with us, Virgin Media commentator, and Dan McDonald of the Irish Independent also here. Dan, how you doing?
I'm good, Joe. Dave?
The general chat on the news round, Dan, was, I guess, as the dust settles, a reflection on almost first and foremost just the incompetence of the Super 12 effort, kind of jumping out at everybody over the last couple of days, that it could have been such a cack-handed attempt to try and do something so seismic. What have you made of the last couple of days?
Yeah, I mean, listen, there's the danger of just sort of echoing points that have been made before. You know, I mean, I think that's probably what you're saying is a common enough view. I mean, I presume the timing was related to the fact this UEFA, the new Champions League format was going through on Monday, and it's UEFA Congress this week, and you know that was clearly probably why there was an element of a rush job about it. But I mean, the extent to which it's obviously misjudged the public mood is quite spectacular, and like the apologies. You know, the John Henry one is sort of like, you know, I don't know, it's like some sort of Bill Clinton one from the 90s or something. You know, it's sort of really, really unusual strand of events where now all of a sudden, like, you have these super club owners, you know, falling over themselves to show that, you know, how contrite they are. So, I mean, it's listen, you know, I sort of tend to look at these things probably sometimes with quite a localized perspective, and I know that a lot of the outrage in response to it was probably like, you know, the from the perspective, saying it's natural in Ireland, like, of all, you know, what this could mean for maybe the Premier League or the Premier League 14 and how they felt left behind and stuff. But it was also a pretty worrying story, I think, for a lot of maybe smaller associations and leagues, you know, around Europe. And I would have sort of written this in a piece just gone out there tonight, that you know, the extent to which, like, football in Europe is reliant on UEFA, you know, is unhealthy, probably to some degree. And the discussion of a concept that could maybe have really damaged UEFA would have had a potentially, like, catastrophic impact and knock on, because the revenues from the modern Champions League, you know, are part of what fuels UEFA, which is part of what, you know, allows UEFA to bail out organisations like the FAI and so on. And that's why, like, it was very important that it was probably stopped. But obviously there's that sense of foreboding there that every time there's some kind of power struggle like this, the big clubs eventually end up getting something more in the end. And generally it's not going to be, you know, the other clubs in the Premier League and stuff will suffer. It's generally clubs further down the food ladder who get further away from the top spots. But we'll see. It's interesting today to hear, like, the discussions about, I think you discussed it maybe on the news round earlier, you know, is now the time that UEFA try and push back on the stuff like the places for historical merit and, you know, in the Champions League in 2024 going forward, and that type of thing. Because, like, I mean, in fairness, like, the modern Champions League isn't actually fair, really, like, in terms of, like, sporting merit, even as it is. Like, once it went to 4 places from, you know, the big leagues, that was sort of goodbye to all of that, really, in reality. But what it created was a terrific competition that makes loads of money, that you know, it goes around the continent in a slightly different way. Like, sporting merit, you could argue, really, is it reflected in the Champions League? Probably now. It's not really, let's be honest. But it's still better than the SuperLeague alternative that was floated.
It's funny on that last point. I wonder, even though it's probably not the reason it was put in, but allowing the 3 or 4 best teams from each major league in, it meant you were guaranteed to have the best team of the current season involved. I think it was Daniel Harris made that point on AM this morning. You know, for instance, take this season as an example. Liverpool would be in the Champions League and would be the sole English representative, but they're certainly not the best team in Europe at the moment. So actually you guarantee whatever decline or improvement happens by having the 3 or 4 best teams in, you guarantee the best team is certainly in the Champions League.
Well, yeah, no, you do in the Champions League itself. I mean, it doesn't guarantee that you have the best team of the teams that only get, of the countries that only get 1 entrant to the qualifying round. You know what I mean? Like, so.
Don't worry about them.
Well, but that's the point.
I know, that's the point.
That's the whole point of the whole thing. I mean, like, and listen, I know why that is. Like, I mean, you know, you can romanticize a time that's gone. Like, you know, I sort of mentioned in the piece this evening, like, there's a documentary on BBC One the other night in Derry City, which is brilliant. The story of Derry City in the 1980s and how they sort of joined the League of Ireland and went up to become champions, and they got Benfica. They became champions, then they went to the European Cup and you get Benfica in the first round. And it's amazing. I think, you know, listen, this is probably the rantings at times of, like, you know, the frustrated League of Ireland fan. You wish, of course, that those days were there, but you understand why those days aren't there anymore as well. And as I said, like, in a very different way, you know, to the compensation prize for the Champions League being changed, you know, to reflect, as you say, to get the big clubs in from the big leagues, is that there's sort of, you know, it's sort of compensation money that's sent out to smaller associations to keep them sweet, you know, to keep them happy. But it's actually created like a false economy an unlevel playing field in leagues all around Europe now that are dominated by 1 or 2 clubs, because they get the UEFA money, you know, every year, and no one else does. And it's the same clubs in the Champions League qualifying rounds every year. And that's not, like, you know, it's the food chain of football. Like, you'll have a club like Ludogorets, right, who will dominate in Bulgaria because they've got UEFA money after year. But then they get into the Champions League and the consumers complain, oh, Ludogorets against Madrid, this is a one-sided game. This is boring, you know. And all the way down the line, things aren't fair. Like, football is not fair. Like, the days of any kind of 11 playing field is long, long gone. And like, in some respects, like the Premier League clubs this week, you know, they were getting the rug pulled under them, being left behind. But like the middle tier clubs in most of the leagues in Europe, that's happened to them years ago, you know, in recent memories. And it's just, you know, like I you know, some of the Sky stuff, I mean, it's great, you know, like the Monday night coverage from Carragher and Neville and how they were speaking about it. But even like Carragher was sort of getting, you know, talking about the great Champions League competition and you know, the great, how great it is, you know, for the 4 clubs to get into it, that West Ham can qualify for it and so on. I mean, if UEFA changed it, that they would open it up and there was like 7 places for England and like no places for like Red Star Belgrade or Ajax and stuff, would we have statements from Everton and Leicester and all these clubs and Sky talking about how dreadful this was? They probably wouldn't. The race for the top 7 would be like a central tenet of their coverage. So, you know, some of the posturing's a bit much.
Dave, come in on any of that?
Yeah, it's, look, I know Daniel is a huge League of Ireland fan. I don't think I've ever called you Daniel before. Maybe your mother only calls you that.
That's accurate. Yeah, I should be very happy with that. Yeah.
But look, there's no point lamenting the loss of times past. It's that, as Dan said, that horse has bolted so long ago. But it is a different aspect, one of so many almost infinite strands to this story over the last 48 hours that, you know, Sky in some ways today were trying to paint themselves as the drivers of equality and fairness, and that they had in some ways saved the Premier League and saved European football by the, albeit quite brilliant broadcasting that had been done at times. I mean, I was glued to Monday Night Football. I was glued to what Neville was saying after the United Burnley game at the weekend. It made for great television. But they will go whatever way the wind's blowing, as will the clubs that Dan's just mentioned there, if the structures of European club football was due to go their way as well. But you do feel a little bit helpless in this regard. Like, what can possibly be done about it? Nothing. Well, we'll never get back to the days where a Mönchengladbach or a PSV Eindhoven or even a Porto or a Malmo, a Club Bruges, Hamburg, these kind of clubs that were able to genuinely go into what would have been the European Cup or the UEFA Cup or the European Cup Winners' Cup with genuine aspirations to go deep into the competition and win it, where you might have a Real Madrid knocked out in the first round because they happened to draw Liverpool in the opening round. I mean, I wasn't around back then. I wonder, is it something similar to looking back at All-Ireland Gold and TG Cahir and seeing how dreadful the standard of football was at times? And then but yet at the same time, you hear veterans of those days waxing lyrical as to how incredible it was, and the structures were better back then, and it was more equal back then. Maybe it wasn't so great at the time, and maybe there were plenty around at the time that would have seen the Spanish or English champions knocked out at the first hurdle and gone, this competition's a joke. How can we carry on for the next 6 months when Liverpool are already knocked out, the defending champions? So we weren't around then to get a feel for what people thought at the time. I would suggest there are always people that are upset with the structures as they stand in the present day.
Yeah, and the thing is, as I said, I mean, UEFA are loaded now, they were. And actually, that was another strand to the whole thing. I mean, UEFA's revenues, even the Euros and all this stuff, I think it's taken a bit of a hit. And at one point people were suggesting that, UEFA might throw the three rebels out of the Champions League semi-finals. And I was thinking, not a chance of that in any scenario, whether, they need the monies from those games, taking place. And, they need, otherwise they'd have TV companies coming after them and stuff. So there was some of the stuff that just wasn't realistic. And there's still that niggling sense of what happens from here going forward? Is the legacy of this week still a negotiation down the line that, listen, taking my local hat out of it, but I mean, the clubs that Dave mentions there, Malmo or, Bruges or whatever, my sort of favourite experiences in football reporting are going to it does involve Irish clubs going away, but going to Legia Warsaw away and PAOK in Greece and Belgrade, amazing amazing passion, fan displays, these absolute hotbeds of football, where, listen, whatever about our issues here and popularity and other sports dominating and whatever, in these countries around Europe where football is number one, it's all consuming. And there was no place for any of these clubs in the Super League at all, really.
But didn't that just, not to defend the Super League though, but if we're just being honest about it, didn't that just formalise a reality?
Well, yeah, I know what you're saying, but the one thing about UEFA, there is still room for the national champions in the Champions League as it exists. Yeah. Now, what it means is that a lot of the target market for the Super League, of why the Super League idea takes off, they complain about it, as I said. They complain about Real Madrid playing Bate or whatever. I'm sure you've done it here on nights going, the group stages. But and that really annoys me. But I understand from this is how the Super League idea comes about. It's the people want more of the best playing the best. And I understand where that comes from, but that's taking it away from something, some reason of where European football came from, or something we always bang on about, what's great about football is that it's a sport in every country. There'll be something in every country, and it's no surprise that this has happened during a pandemic where it is probably, it's probably empowered the owners to think, well, listen, there's no fans in the stadiums, but there's still huge people tuning into these big Champions League games and these Premier League matches, and this is what people want, and this is what the American owners want, and whatever. And listen, a lot of the people, a lot of the football consumers in Ireland are that way. They might get their sense of place and their local identity from maybe Gaelic games or whatever it might be. And football for them is just a bit in the side, something they discuss and debate. And there's large numbers of people from Ireland who travel over and are hugely passionate and involved themselves in their clubs. But the greater majority are the more people who want to just watch the best game at any given time. And I understand, you understand where that comes from, but that is the thinking that has fueled the Super League concept and the idea and why it came to pass. But it underestimated the depth of feeling that still exists out there for any lingering connection and tradition that remains in the game as it is. But it's a very imperfect world now. But the Super League one was just too ghastly to contemplate for me.
Yeah, no, you and a lot of people. Dave, it's interesting you mentioned watching Monday Night Football the other evening and being gripped by it, and even Adam Lallana, when he was interviewed yesterday, must have been yesterday, he said, oh, we were all sitting down to watch Monday Night Football, we were all gripped by it. In that 48-hour window, or I guess it was maybe a 24-hour window, less even, from, say, Sunday when Neville first contributed on Sky Sports and went viral after the Manchester United-Burnley game, through to 11 o'clock on Monday evening. How significant do you think his contribution was? I'm curious to know, because I think it's absolutely been seismic. I'm not sure if this had broken on a Wednesday and Neville happened to be off for those few days, how the landscape might have been different or otherwise. I mean, I get the fan feeling, but I do feel like he distilled this thing amazingly well and instantly.
Yeah, I don't know. I definitely agree that he verbalized the emotion of the average football fan in a succinct and accurate way, and it certainly got the pulse racing when you were watching it. But for one thing, I mean, Sky also have a 24-hour news channel, and I think had it broken on a Wednesday, Gary Neville probably would have been live in Sky Sports News on the Wednesday evening, and they probably would have had Carragher there as well. So he definitely would have found a way and an outlet to get his word in. I think as Dan described it as ghastly, which it was a horrifying, potentially seismic structure that these clubs were aiming for. And I think even without Gary Neville saying what he was saying on Sunday and then Monday evening, the level of ill feeling towards it from the average football fan, I think, would have found its way into the public domain and into Sky Sports News and into all the various sports outlets, and it would have generated the same momentum, maybe not as quickly. I agree with you in that regard, that you mentioned it earlier during the news round, that Sky in particular were able to get their point across and change the narrative in their direction and in the direction of the average football fan before anyone involved with the European Super League could steer it in their direction.
Yeah.
They actually never even gave themselves the opportunity to try and get their message across. And Sky were able to do it almost instantaneously. I've never watched a build-up to a game of football where there was no build-up to that game of football. We'll probably never see that again. It was like the Liverpool game was just a mere afterthought, and the only reference made to it was the fact that the Leeds United players were wearing a T-shirt which was saying, football is for the fans, you need to go and earn it. I don't know. We'll never really know how much of an influence Neville and Carragher have.
Course.
Probably a little bit, but I think that the football fans of the 14 in particular, but and the 6 clubs as well, were just so horrified by it that their message would eventually found its way to the owners, and ultimately we probably would have ended up in the same position we're in now.
Well, Neville certainly, Dan, on the Sunday put pay to any potential for tribalism to break out or for Manchester United fans to think, maybe this isn't so bad. He absolutely eviscerated Manchester United, and he turned this into a look at the Glazers. Look at the Glazers and what they're doing to our club, and he called it a criminal act. Even a contribution like that made it very hard for anyone who was a Manchester United fan and one-eyed and thinking, God, playing Real Madrid a few times a year mightn't be the worst thing in the world, and we will be guaranteed Champions League spots. It made that position untenable, I think. Such was the force of his contribution.
Yeah, and I mean, there's still probably elements of tribalism in this Neville Klopp stuff, and like that sort of whataboutery stuff, which was there. But then, some of this stuff, again, is because we're indoors so much and we're following sort of social media reactions and stuff so closely. But I know what you're saying. Like, he definitely went all out from an early start. And as you say, like, did it really? I would agree with David. I think it would have come to this conclusion anyway. But I do get the sense sometimes you would speak to players or whatever, that I think Neville and Carragher are probably very influential, and they probably might have, I think in terms of the way the wind was blowing, I think some of the reaction from maybe players and people around them, like at times, players can be a bit more circumspect about revealing their feelings. But I think knowing that, like, you had Neville and Carragher saying we need every player, every manager out saying this, I think that probably, it almost, in a sort of a weird way, it was sort of building a mob mentality against anyone who didn't come out and condemn it, in a way. Like, any footballer who come out and say, well, I want to see where this goes, and I'm interested in hearing about this. like they would have been absolutely savaged. And I think probably, Neville and Carragher probably led the way on that to some respect. But I think maybe as well, you probably have to give people a bit more credit too, that, they could see it for what it is. And, there may be sports fans in other countries who will defend themselves, defend their club no matter what the issue may be. Yeah. But on this one, I think they realised, listen, it's just, we'll repeat, it's in a way though, like as much as I say, it's easy to say now, well, it was always going to end this way. The speed with which it ended, I have to say, was still a bit surprising. And maybe the timing of those key shows might have contributed to that.
I think they did create a climate whereby, good luck to anyone coming out saying, well, let's hear them out or let's hear their logic. I mean, this is a criminal act. This is a disgrace. The Glazers need booting out of the country. I mean, it's very hard for anyone to come on and say, well, let's hear what they have to say, But
the irony, sorry, Don, the irony is that the target for this new league, they were not the fans that are in Anfield every weekend, well, pandemic otherwise, or Old Trafford. It was completely targeted fans across the world who are maybe happy to pay there. As Gary Neville said, they're £1 per game, 150 odd million Manchester United fans willing to pay £1 or €1 per game or whatever the currency might be in their prevailing country. That it was the outcry of outrage from the supporters within the cities themselves. In England, we're only seeing what's going on in England. We haven't really got an insight into what it's like in Milan or Madrid or Barcelona or elsewhere. But it was never going to be a league that was going to take these fans with them. I mean, what does the average Manchester United or Liverpool fan in Hong Kong or, Indonesia or the United States or South America feel about this? I mean, did they think, you know what, this actually could be a really good idea? I'm tired of seeing Manchester United play Burnley and Aston Villa, Sheffield United at the weekend. I only get to see them playing Real Madrid once every 5 or 6 years, depending on how the draw goes. I wonder globally what the overall feel was for something like this. We'll never probably know because the plug was pulled on it so quickly. But they're the audience that these clubs were targeting, and they really did not care one way or the other about what the fans within the countries themselves felt. And ironically, it's because of them that the whole thing has been scuppered.
Yes. Dan, your thoughts on that tension between the match-going fan who still talks about their support of these clubs in a very traditional way versus the global audience, even the audience here? Yeah, and listen, and I think, that's part of why, people were so offended by aspects of it. Even in particular, listen, you've had the jibes with, Chelsea and Man City are sort of, new money or whatever. And, the sort of the disrespect shown. The reason that those clubs are all powerful, all 6 of them, is because they play in a country that is football mad and has an absolutely brilliant football culture and always did. And and Dave would know from probably all the commentary of games he's done, that you go to parts of the UK that sort of, that light up. They can be grim enough towns sometimes, but they light up on match day because, the football club is the hub of the community, and it's the full grounds over the years around the country in England that allowed the best clubs to to get richer. That's what made English football so attractive to everyone. It wasn't just about people getting interested in English football, because of one club or 2 clubs. It was what the whole sort of league and the environment and everything stood for and the history of the game and all of that. And that is the origins of football and its success story today. And as much as, yes, the game has changed and in all aspects of it, there's a romanticized vision of it that's gone, and there's no real romance in it that much at all. That is still the root of it. That's still the heart of it, and again, maybe closed doors, football has allowed people to just forget that, because at the highest level of the game, it can still be all consuming when the football is really good, like Bayern and PSG. But a lot of closed doors football for me is still pretty grim. But a lot of people are still watching it. So, economically it's working for the TV companies and the overseas. But I think you need a reminder now and again what the game is really meant to be about, or at least where the game started from and what its origins were that made it popular in the first place. And what's interesting for me, is this just a moment, is this just a brief moment in time where for 48 hours, you have this fight back and everyone says, well done everybody, we've put that to bed. The head of the European Clubs Association now, Agnelli has stepped away, so the PSG guy has taken over.
You know, like it's sort of, and I know the lads on AM this morning had like Daniel Lambert on from Bow speaking about, well, maybe, you know, when all this pandemic ends, will people start to think more about their decisions, and, you know, maybe, you know, should we remind ourselves that like what football maybe used to represent, and should we try and reflect that a bit more in our choices, or will we just go, well, listen, we're glad that happened. We're glad that the Premier League has been saved, and let's go back to, you know, now there's 5 games on Sunday, you know, and, from noon until sort of almost midnight, and let's just consume it all, and that's it. And like all the stuff, like, you know, kickoff times being moved and all that, that's also been an attack on a lot of the match-going fans. The pricing of merchandise, the pricing of tickets to games, you know, all of that as a product of that. And, you know, is that going to change? I mean, it's not really.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.